So as you can see, we have a great lineup of speakers here today. I can't wait for you to hear from all of these amazing and dynamic speakers. We got our keynote, Taylon Murphy. Man, an introduction just won't cut it for Taylon. Actually, an introduction won't cut it for any of these speakers. So I hope that you will stay for the entire piece so that you can hear from every one of these speakers. Next slide. So some housekeeping. Please be respectful while you are on camera and while you are speaking, and while you are making comments in the chat. We are here all with a common goal. We may not always agree on how to get there, but know that we all have the same intentions of making sure that we're keeping our community safe. So please be respectful, disagree with the idea, not the person. We want to make sure that you can hear our speakers. So we are putting all of the microphones on mute. If we somehow forgot to put your microphone on mute, please do so by clicking on the microphone icon that is on the bottom left corner of your screen if you are on a computer, and if you are on a tablet, it might be on the top right corner of your Zoom screen. If you are calling in, you can dial *6 and that will mute and unmute your phone. This is my favorite feature, gallery view. I love gallery view because it allows us to see everyone who is participating in this and see the facial expressions and all those good love that's coming from people participating. However, we're going to have some dynamic speakers, as I mentioned, so you might want to zero in and focus on that speaker by clicking on the speaker view. You can do that again at the top right corner of your computer screen. If you are on a computer, there is a gallery view and a speaker view that you can click on. If you are on a smartphone or a tablet, you can simply swipe left or right to go between gallery view and speaker view. Q&As. We will have open discussion towards the end where we're going to invite you guys to come off of mute. But to make sure that we are keeping a good flow of the conversation, we are asking that you put your questions in the chat box, and our speakers, as well as our moderators, will try to get to every single question possible. And then finally, we want to make sure that we are keeping track of the conversation so that we are using it to elevate and move our strategies. So this meeting is going to be recorded. We ask that you stay and participate. We are not using this for anything other than the campaign to erase the database and make our communities more safer. And that includes being safe from the police. So please, if you do have a problem with recording, we understand if you prefer not to stay, but we urge you to stay and participate in the full program and discussions. And without further ado, I am going to pass you to one of the dopest MCs I know. Brother Vic, you have the floor. Thank you, everyone.
No, I'm joking. Good afternoon, everyone. Marquise, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for the intro as well. Yeah, I'm your MC for the day. I will be moderating the majority of this and introducing our speakers and panelists and all the good stuff that we have going on today. So again, my name is Victor Dempsey. I'm a community organizer. I'm also an impacted community member, directly affected by what we're going to talk about today. So we've got some great speakers. Can you pull up the agenda for me, just real quick? So here's our agenda for today. As you can see, we have a lot. I also want to welcome everybody again because this is the Gangs Coalition's first summit. We've done tons of workshops. Obviously, the pandemic kind of threw everyone for a loop, so we had to kind of reinvent the things and how to stay engaged with folks. And this is what we came up with. So I'm honored and blessed to be in this space with so many folks, especially folks that's all presenting. So our agenda today, I don't want to run through everything because I definitely want to save time for the speakers, but as you can see, we have a host of topics that we will be discussing this evening. And our hope from all of this is that folks can not only retain this information, but join the fight with us. You'll see later on in this presentation and this summit that we also have our national partners with us today, which I'm dopely excited about. But before we get into all that, you know, my brother Marquise mentioned that we've had some greats in my eyes in this fight with us today. So I want to introduce our first speaker, our keynote speaker, Mr. Taylon Murphy. Taylon, I met a few years back in fighting for this work, and what resonated with me the most was his strength to persevere, his strength to problem solve, his strength to help others while he needs help himself. And I'm gonna leave it there because I want him to introduce himself, but I also want to give him the space and time that he needs to talk about this. So without further ado, Taylon Murphy, take it away, my man.
You're still on mute, Taylon.
Taylor, you still on mute.
Okay, here we go. I'm sorry for technical difficulties. I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Victor Dempsey. I want to thank Marquise Jenkins. I want to thank every advocate and everybody that's on this that's involved in this well put together event. I believe that is very important for the things that's been going on, especially the things that's been going on and things that have been affecting my life. And I just want to thank everybody for having the courage to step up and try to do things, strive to do things right, and bringing forth freedom, justice, and equality. I mean, for all, not just for one demographic of people, not just for one, not for just the bourgeoisie, but also for the proletarian. My story starts off right where I'm at. Actually, I'm right here sitting in an office space in between Grant and Manhattanville at Ground Zero, and one of the places where one of the biggest raids at the time was the biggest raids in New York City took place. I know the gang database played a big part in those raids. 103 individuals were taken out of West Harlem, and now I have I'm blessed to be able to be part of the solution and trying to help people navigate through this community so stuff like this will never happen again. Like Vic said, it takes a lot of strength to help others, especially when you're in pain. I'm in pain every day. I walk out of this office and I look to my right and I see the building in which my daughter was killed in an ongoing generational beef between two housing developments. I walk out this office, I look to my left, I see a store that was played over and over again in my son's case that was very controversial, that he was convicted to 48 to life without any physical evidence or any concrete evidence to even put him in the place of make him even get this time. You have to excuse me today. I'm very hot because I'm sitting in an office where our air conditioner burnt out, but I have to be here because there's a lot of things that's been happening in West Harlem, and there's a lot of things that we've been doing to try to curtail the generational and the social and the economic poverty that's going on in many of our communities that are marginalized. Right now, I'm the executive director of organization, or what can I say, a movement called TCMF. I mean, we call it TCMF because we took the initials of my daughter's name and created a whole nother entity that we'll be doing business under the guise of Together Communities Move Forward. And I say Together Communities Move Forward because we are an entity that we are striving to get two housing developments in one area that was caught up in the biggest raid in New York City to work together. My team that I do have is a restorative justice team. When I say a restorative justice team, we do restorative justice, circles, squares, and triangles, and some octagons. I have two individuals that are on my team right now that are out canvassing to some unfortunate events in the community that are from Grant and Manhattanville, and they also have to be two people that were on the list, on one of two people that were part of the 103 individuals that were arrested during the raids in 2014, prosecuted, detained, prosecuted, and convicted. I also work, my supervisor, my CM supervisor, this is a credible messenger-led movement. My team supervisor happens to be the god brother of the young man that killed my daughter. I'll repeat, my team supervisor happens to be the god brother of the young man that is convicted of killing my daughter. I also have independent contractors that work with me. That one of the independent contractors that are working with me happens to be the older brother of the young man that killed my daughter. And I say all of that to say this, where gangs, groups, grassroots advocates for neighborhood solutions is headed, and the direction they're headed in is exactly what I'm doing and what my team is doing here right now at Ground Zero. We're a frontline movement. We're on the ground. We have community involvement, which I believe that a lot of movements and a lot of CBOs with the same missions that we have don't have the same community involvement that we have. I believe that we are people that look like the people in our community. We also go through the same things the people in our community go through, and we look for the solutions for the people in our community, and we try to lead by example to show if we can transform our lives, that you can definitely transform your life under any kind of circumstances. I mean, we all live under the rule. When our rules is ABC. Adversity builds character. Any obstacle that we see, we can get over it, overcome it, accomplish, and achieve. If you believe, you can achieve. And like I said, I am so happy and so grateful to be a part of this coalition that should be moving forward to make historical changes, and not only legislation, and not only the way that we view each other. We're going to make historical changes where we change the dynamics in our cities and many cities across the nation and also across the world. And like I said, I'm not going to keep you long. I know Vic was very adamant, and I also got my 911 operator that just came in. I mean, we do have some people that currently work in some type of capacity with law enforcement that is actually on my team. So, I mean, like I said, man, it's a group effort. It takes unity, it takes bravery, it takes courage, and it takes love to heal shattered hearts. And the reason why I'm pointing at shattered hearts, because shattered hearts is one of the clothing lines that these young men out here is producing, and I think it speaks volumes to what's going on in this community and what we're trying to restore and what we're trying to fix. We are healers. We are, emotional doctors. We are unconventional therapeutic. We are unconventional therapists. We provide these therapeutic services to not only this community but the communities abroad. I won't be any much longer. You know, like I said, I'm just grateful and I'm very, very honored to be a part of this coalition.
You muted yourself, Taylon. We didn't catch the end, bro. I don't know where he went. Taylon is a man of many things, but technical savvy, I don't think is one of them. But that's good though, because we need him to do work elsewhere in these streets. Go ahead, Taylon. I see you back, bro.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. There's stuff going on here. Like I said, I'm right here on the front line. There's things going on all like constantly. This is real time. This is as real as it gets. We done had one shooting yesterday. We done had a homicide 2 days ago. My team is on the ground really trying to figure out what's going on so we can kind of mediate this thing. But I mean, we're more, oh my goodness.
We with you, brother. We with you.
I'm getting information coming in from some of these incidents. Like I said, I'm proud to be a part of this coalition. We are the epitome of what you're striving to do and what you're striving to show and present to the establishment. And please bear with me. I have to go, but like I said, we're the epitome of what grassroots advocates for neighborhood solutions is really about. Thank you, brothers. I'm sorry. I got some things that I have to do, and I'm gonna talk to you guys later. And please keep up the fight. Thank you.
Peace, Taylon, and thank you again, man. You know, I also just want to reiterate, you know, Taylon is not just a comrade of ours. As you can see, he's always on the move, literally. One thing that we really try to highlight in the coalition work that we do is alternatives to policing. You know, trying to brainstorm that. What does that look like in all of our communities? As we know, all our communities are different, right? And when we think about alternatives to policing, credible messengers are the top of that list to me. Credible messengers being folks who walk, live that life, and understands that life, not because they were thugs or gangsters or drug dealers, was because we understand the same trauma that's being resonated today. So credible message plays a big part in the work that we do. But moving on, the next few speakers, I'm always excited to talk about, just because, you know, they are our future in my eyes. You know, it's one thing to have a coalition of adults doing this type of work, and advocates and organizers and all of this stuff, people who study how to do this work. But then when we have the youth stepping up, when we have the youth coming in to say, hey, this is what we need to thrive. This is what we need to be better. This is what we need so we don't fall into these lines. So I'm not going to hold up too much. So I want to introduce Anani Roy, Kiana Ortiz, Osvaldo Garcia, and Alexis Yanni. I always say her name wrong. Laniz. I think it's Laniz, right, Alexis?
It's Laniz.
Laniz, see? I'll be trying to be fancy and give you the little extra twang at the end of it.
I know, right? It's French, so you know. A little spice never hurt.
So I'm going to turn the floor over to you all, because I think your voice is way more important than mine today. So please, you guys take it away.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction, Victor. We did create a presentation, so I'm gonna go screen share that right now. So yeah, hi everyone. We are the Youth Justice Board. My name is Osvaldo Garcia, and I'm with Alexis and Kiana. And we are going to present our report, which is All Eyes on Us, which we did from the years 2018 to 2019. So these are just some contents of the report, or of our presentation. So first, we're going to talk about the context of our report, definition, process, and gang database. And secondly, we're going to talk about the harm of the gang database, the explicit problems, implicit problems, and implications and consequences. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about the needs of the youth. So digital citizenship curriculum for students, consistency in youth agency, and city council protections and legislation. So again, we are the Youth Justice Board. Our presenters are Kiana, Alexis, and me, Osvaldo. So yeah, we were the cohort from 2018 to 2019, and we focused and researched on digital safety and surveillance on youth in New York City. So section 1, so context of All Eyes on Us report. So just a quick summary of the All Eyes on Us report. It's a report on policy solutions for identified issues related to youth and social media. It includes policy recommendations for the NYPD, the Department of Education, and the City Council of New York. And its main focus is on digital citizenship curriculum and the gang database, which disproportionately affects marginalized youth of color. So we went through an entire process throughout the year. So first we did our research, and as a team, we researched and analyzed papers, articles, and research journals regarding digital surveillance, and specifically how it affected the youth and overall marginalized populations. We then did focus groups and interviews with stakeholders, district attorneys, and youth groups to engage more perspectives and understand the complexities of the issues and how deeply ingrained it is to the different systems that we have, including education, our justice system, just different aspects of our life that we didn't realize until we delved deeper into the issue. And we presented and wrote a report on it. So we wrote the report over the summer and presented to different organizations and stakeholders about our recommendations. And so, yeah, we just continue to speak about it, and we're excited to speak to all of you and really discuss the gang database. So now I'm going to pass it on to Alexis, and she's going to talk about the harm of the gang database.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexis. And to begin, I feel we know that the gang database is a problem. And just to go over small little tags, first one, the gang database is made up of 99% of non-white people. So just think about that. 99% of the gang database are people of color. Also, there are children as young as 6 months on these databases. It's the vagueness of the criteria to be on the gang database gives people so much leeway. Anybody of any age, of any background could be on this list and they wouldn't even know, which brings up another issue with the gang database. No one knows if you're on this list. You could be on it for years and not be informed. You could be on it because of who you speak with, who you interact with, the vagueness of the gang database, colors, what colors you wear, what neighborhoods you live in, what people you hang out with and interact with on social media. All of these things can potentially put you on the gang database and have your information given to, I'm sorry, it's very hot. Your information given to outside organizations that may be able to criminalize you. And we all know that that's a problem that we all have to deal with. Another thing to bring up is that being in a gang isn't illegal. If we really think about it, it's the criminalization of Black and brown bodies. It's the criminalization of youth in these neighborhoods. It's the criminalization and oh, I'm so sorry. It's the criminalization of NYCHA housings, projects. That's what the gang database is, and that's what it's logging and it's tracking. Also, the gang database is the implications and consequences of the gang database is that once you are on it, if you were to get arrested or have any kind of contact with outside organizations, your charges would be raised or you would be denied bail. So let's say someone is on the gang database. If you were to get arrested, if you were to be in contact with the police at any point in time, your name being on that list could get you can get you a higher sentence, could deny yourself bail, and as it was said before, you could even have racketeering charges or RICO charges applied against you because of this list. Also, the federal charges, these are federal charges under the conspiracy law, so that's what RICO is. And these charges could raise your sentence multiple years. And with all of that being said, I want to pass it to Kiana so she can continue on and explain just how horrible this gang database is.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Kiana, and I'm going to talk about specifically the needs of the youth when it comes to the gang database, because we're all here and we all know these complications and issues and how it really destroys our community. So we're coming as Youth Justice Board with needs for how youth can be protected under these surveillance laws. The first one that I want to note is the need for education. During our research, it showed large gaps and issues in the ways that youth are educated on surveillance, social media, and their rights. When we did focus groups with youth, they often mentioned how they were not aware that social media policies even existed for their schools until they got in trouble for them, which is a really backwards way of trying to regulate how youth are on social media. And without any knowledge of the risks that come with social media, young people inevitably become vulnerable to surveillance and they're not able to protect themselves and their data. So education and through a digital citizenship curriculum particularly is one way that youth can be on the right track to protecting themselves and not facing the consequences of surveillance. And the next issue is consistency. So what we also learned in our focus groups is that social media policies vary by school. Any school can choose how harsh the punishments are for catching youth doing the wrong thing on social media, which means students are not universally educated on what risks they face. And that also means that different schools can decide how they want to punish their youth, which isn't consistent, and it can lead to a lot of damage. So this lack of consistency, working with the lack of transparency, makes it impossible for youth to actually make educated decisions on how they use social media. And the second point on this slide is agency. So the people and institutions who make these social media policies have no real knowledge or experience of how social media works or why youth use social media in reality. So youth have no input on the way that their actions are seen or perceived by adults. And in addition, they don't create the policies or regulations or punishments that come with those regulations. So youth have no input on how they are regulated, monitored, and like punished by adults. And the next point is City Council. So the New York City Council has a responsibility to protect youth and their digital data because we're minors, and also because, as we saw before, we're not educated on how social media can really affect our lives. So some ways that City Council can protect youth is through regulations on surveillance technology that are being used on citizens. This includes transparency on how the NYPD uses different technology and surveillance tactics. The public deserves to know how they're being surveilled if the transparency is going to go both ways, you know? The next one is rules and regulations on how government agencies use social media. We also learned that on the gang database, many different agencies had access to it, including ACS, ICE. So these partnerships with these organizations can harm someone's life way past the justice system. You know, it can damage their relationship to housing, it can damage their relationships with their family or their access to jobs. So there needs to be restrictions, or at least a transparency on how many organizations actually have access to someone's social media information. And the last point of what City Council can do for youth is a Youth Bill of Rights. So this would educate and protect youth and their digital footprint. And more specifically, this Bill of Rights would have input from youth themselves. So they can have an active part on how their social media is monitored and how they can deal with digital surveillance. So yeah, those were the main solutions that we brought towards you guys for the gang database and surveillance. And yeah.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, for real, seriously. Really quick, before we move on, Oswaldo, you can take down your share screen for me, please. Appreciate you, brother. So I want to ask you guys a quick question before we move on. Real quick, not too crazy, not too crazy. When I was introducing you all, you know, I said to everyone, you're the youth. It's the youth. I'm an old man. I'm not gonna say my age, but I'm an old man, right? I'm an organizer. It's only but so long I can run the streets. It's only but so long I can respond to the communities that need assistance. You get what I'm saying? I would like to ask the three of you really quick, and then we'll move on. What drove you all to look to do this research? Like, what clicked in your heads to say, you know what, I care about that, or something's wrong here? What happened, if you don't mind? Like, that's what I think. And really quick too, I asked that question because I think not just for the folks who's attending the session, or even us who organized it, and even you all who did the research, I think sometimes people care about issues but don't know what they can do. So I kind of want to see where you all started at, and see if we could share some of that, if you don't mind. Maybe we can go to each of you really quick for a brief, thing. So let's start with Alexis first. No shade, Kiana, as well, though.
Definitely. What got me into this work was, honestly, to be completely honest, my father always called me a social justice warrior. I love to argue. I love to make my opinions be known. So when I found this program, and I already had contact with the work that we did with the gang database, with digital surveillance of the youth, because as a young person living in New York, you throw parties, you have all this fun, and then you have cops banging down your door the next, 30 minutes. And things are shut down. So for me to see what's happening in the world, for me to experience it and my friends to experience it, then finding this program and to understand that my voice does matter, my opinions are valid, and I could do something about it is what made me start this work and really dive into it.
Thank you, Alexis. Ladies first, Oswaldo. Kiana, let's go.
Yeah, so to add on, I think something that really I don't consider a lot is the shock factor that we all had initially when researching this thing. You know, we're all familiar now with the gang database and how surveillance works, but when we all started out as young people, just like the young people in schools who aren't educated on social media. So when we first learned that the gang database existed and like how much access adults actually had to our digital lives, it kind of struck me, especially because, you know, that's why we push so hard for education curriculums on this stuff, because it took us like 6 months of research to even push through the surface that the NYPD like hides from us on how surveillance works. So that's going to take a lot more effort and a lot more like education with other youth. And that's why when I first started the research too, we always talked about how we told our friends about this stuff and they were shocked, like they had no idea this stuff existed, which is why it was so important to us to like continue this work.
Thank you again. Thank you. Oswaldo, your turn, brother.
Yeah, just like adding on to what Kiana was saying, you know, we're all youth. We're very familiar with social media. All of us have social media. My little sister, she's 12 and she has social media. Like we're all a lot of youth are getting into social media, and we've grown up with Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and all these different programs. And to know that all of our, you know, that we were being tracked since such a young age and being surveilled and, you know, being watched over by, you know, people we don't even know or we didn't even know were watching us, like the NYPD, like the Department of Education, and all these other different companies as well. It was a huge shock factor for us. And, you know, to see how just being a part of the gang database can really put you in a much more terrible situation when it comes to the justice system. It was just an incredibly disturbing subject to learn about. And we're you know, we want to push for more youth to be educated about their rights on social media, and for, you know, our representatives to really push for, you know, the Youth Bill of Rights, and, you know, represent us and protect our digital safety. So yeah, that's kind of how we got into it, and, you know, what our primary objectives are.
Thank you again, guys. Like, seriously, I think you've heard this from me numerous times since we started working together, but you truly are amazing, all of you, not just the three of you, but the whole team who helped you guys get to this research point where you're at. And the fact that you were able to do such a thorough investigative research piece and share that and publish it is just kudos to you all, you know? And I think for folks who's joining us today, it's imperative that we understand peer-to-peer education. You know, it's truly in this work, peer-to-peer education is a big thing. You know, folks who look like me, talk like me, dress like me, we're peers, right? In essence. So sometimes to get to the youth, not my old butt talking to the youth or the old guy, I want to bring some youth to talk to them. You know what I mean? So again, round of applause for you all, and I'm really looking forward to what else you all do and just working with you in general. With that, we're going to move on a little bit. Oh, really quick, too. Just so you all know, folks who are looking at the chat room, my colleague Josemar did put their report in the chat. So folks can go in there. Please share it, use it, save it, view it at your own time. But we're going to move on now. Now, on to my colleagues, the team, the A-team, like we like to say sometimes. We want to give a Gangs Coalition summary. We want to talk about some of the work that this coalition has done. I'm super, super proud to be a part of this coalition because we literally started just as concerned citizens. Legitly, I promise you. Almost every single person that's a part of this coalition that's gotten it to where we are today it's a passionate and it's personal to each of us. So with that, I want to pass it over to my colleague, Ali, who's going to give a brief overview of who we are and what we do. Ali?
Thanks, Vic. Hey, everyone. Ali Panjwani, he, him pronouns, the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, and also a part of the Gangs Coalition. Just going to take like 30 seconds here to tell you a little bit more about the coalition and the work that the coalition does, and then we'll go in and hear a little bit more from some other members of the coalition to talk about how the gang database and gang policing intersects with their work. But the Gangs Coalition stands for Grassroots Advocates for Neighborhood Groups and Solutions. It's a coalition made up of organizers, experts, legal advocates, directly impacted community members. And our main goal is to dismantle the systems that increase surveillance, police contact, or enhance punishment based on law enforcement profiling of Black, Latinx, and immigrant communities as gang or crew members. And central to eliminating the use of these tools is taking resources away from the police department and prosecutors and moving them towards harm-reducing, community-based programs that are proven to make neighborhoods safer. So we have several different committees that are a part of the coalition. We have a legislative and policy committee that's working on legislation. We have an organizing and action committee, which is the committee that organized this event and will organize a rally that we'll tell you about in just a little bit. And we all work together to achieve these goals, and erasing the database in New York City is sort of our central demand, which then intersects with a bunch of other issues that you'll learn about just shortly. And just wanted to give a quick shout out to the organizations that are a part of the Gangs Coalition. We have the Youth Justice Board, who you just met, Brooklyn Defender Services, Immigrant Defense Project, Justice Strategies, Latino Justice, the Legal Aid Society, Policing and Social Justice Project, and the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. So thanks again for joining us today. If you want to continue to follow our work, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Gangs Coalition, and learn more about our events there. And I'll drop the link to our website in the chat as well if you want to contact us and get in touch to collaborate. But I'll pass it over now to Josemar, and we're going to play a quick video to show you some of the work that the Gangs Coalition's been working on and framing some of the issues.
Great, thanks, Ellie. I'm just going to queue up the video. This is one of 5 videos short videos that we made over the last couple of years to kind of help explain some of the work that's happened in New York City. It's a national issue, and we're going to have some people here from different parts of the country. But we wanted to zero in and focus a little bit about what's been happening in New York City with the world's largest police department and how they track alleged gang members. Pull this up.
Police officers went into an apartment that they raided, and a young boy was crying because his brother was being arrested. And they looked at that young boy and said, "Why are you crying? We'll be back to get you in a couple of years."
That's Taylor Murphy Sr., and he's describing just one of the many instances related to NYPD's gang database. It's what many are calling Stop and Frisk 2.0. This is a city council hearing in New York City. The topic that's on everyone's mind today is what many activists are calling Stop and
Hey, Josemar, I think the sound went out.
Josemar, can we get the sound back?
Jos, we can't hear it, bro.
Smith. As we represent. And this.
You guys hear it now? Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
My name is Taylor Murphy. I'm representing the people.
He's lost 2 children due to the activities of NYPD's gang database.
I'm also the father of Tayshana Chicken Murphy, a young lady that was killed in West Harlem.
Her murder directly relates to one of the major gang raids in 2014. It led to over 100 arrests. It was all because of the 2 men who were convicted of her murder were also part of Money Avenue. Side note, Murphy later teamed up with the mother of one of the men who killed his daughter in order to form an anti-gun violence campaign called Both Sides of the Gun.
They might have been gang related, but their actions were their own actions. They were individuals. I'm also the father of a young man named Taylor Murphy Jr. Right now is currently doing 50 years to life for his alleged involvement with this conspiracy in West Harlem.
People barely out of middle school who are being added to the gang database. And there are more than one, there are several.
Just the idea of having 13-year-olds and 15-year-olds placed in databases without any help or without parents being informed about it is very troubling.
While the police department maintains that being a member of a gang is not a crime, being included on its database can have several collateral consequences. The Legal Aid Society criticized the use of gang databases, saying that they're over-inclusive and inaccurate, and they pose a lot of pre-trial obstacles for people who are inaccurately held or labeled as a gang member. In 2011, a survey of over 60 public and private defense attorneys in more than 40 jurisdictions nationwide revealed that 90% of attorneys said the question of gang affiliation had come up during bail hearings. 60% said their clients would have been released if it not had been for the allegations by prosecutors of gang affiliation. And 2/3 of the attorneys said that they had seen substantially higher bails set due to claims of gang affiliation. Want to know something weird? You don't have to commit a crime to be on a gang database. You don't even have to be suspected of committing a crime. If you meet any of the following criteria that I'm about to list, then that means that NYPD can qualify you as a gang member. If he or she admits to the membership during debriefing, or through the course of investigation, an individual is reasonably believed to belong to a gang and is identified as such by 2 independent sources, being seen at spots frequented by alleged gang members, scars, tattoos associated with gangs, gang-related documents, hand signs, colors associated with gangs, like red, blue, green, yellow, black, white, gray, purple. You can kind of see where people get a little bit uneasy about this. A known gang location can be the projects, or a bodega, or a basketball court. This is one of the biggest criticisms against it. It's too vague. Living in these neighborhoods, anyone can be a gang member.
How do you surveil a community for 4 years and do no type of intervention? In my daughter's second trial, it was a second trial. This trial of the New York State against Robert Cartagena. A Viper Room officer who watched the cameras said, and I quote, that he's seen 2 young men come out of a building with a firearm. And he also said he's seen them menace another group of individuals with that firearm. If we are supposed to be surveilling and intercepting crimes, why weren't them young men stopped? What happened was them young men were able to walk across the street, past 2 buildings, chase my daughter and my son into a building where they locked the door, where they closed the door, thought it was locked, that's a whole nother story, and caught her on the 4th floor and shot her down like a dog. Then it was a snowball effect, a chain of events that happened that led up to 103 individuals being arrested. Where is the accountability? This person seeing this on the camera and not coming to stop those individuals when they were menacing somebody with a firearm? Where is the accountability with NYPD and accepting the fact that that whole incident and this whole saga could have been stopped before it started? Why am I sitting here when I should be sitting in Madison Square Garden watching my daughter play in the WNBA? There's some real fundamental issues and there's some real fundamental flaws in what we are dealing with. And if we don't start putting integrity, morality, and the people first, we are going to have some more serious issues.
Thanks, Joe Smart, for playing the video. I don't want to take up too much time talking because I want to get to my colleagues who are just as amazing as their work as everyone else. So next up, I want to bring, well, really quick, actually, I'm lying. You know I run my mouth a lot, for those who know me. That video was substantial because that was one of the first videos this coalition did. When we had that hearing set up, that hearing was with the city council and the public safety committee in New York City in 2018, I believe. When we had that hearing, we had council members crying, literally tears, actual tears, saying, how can we criminalize our youth in that manner? We're talking about like kids, not teenagers. At that particular time, there was a 10-year-old on the database. And the oldest at that particular time was 82 years old. So another one of our colleagues always likes to say, with that timeline, my son and my dad or grandfather could be in this database at the same time. So we talk about generations, it's really crazy. But anyways, with that being said, I do want to pass it to our legal expert, if you will, to Babe Howell. Babe's been a professor and one of the leading voices in the coalition, and she's really opened our eyes to so much more. So with further ado, Babe Howell, everyone of CUNY School of Law. Babe, you there? There you go.
Thanks so much. And I feel like some of you, your video, Alexis, the youth group have covered a lot of this ground, but I think it's worth kind of drilling down very specifically about what this gang database is and the truth behind the statement that no criminality is required, anyone can be added, and that it has very serious racial implications and First Amendment association implications. So I'm going to share screen. I think I can do that. And walk you through just a few of the specific criteria that the NYPD use. And let me try to put that on big screen. Okay. So first, you heard this already, but perhaps seeing it in black and white and a pie chart. The NYPD, they call this a criminal group database, but they also call it the gang database, is 99.2% not white. It's essentially 99% Black and Hispanic. They don't include the mafia, that might be a criminal group people are familiar with, the Proud Boys, motorcycle gangs, white supremacists. It is exclusively a database of people of color. As Alexis told us, they don't have to give you notice when they're putting you in this gang database, and you don't need to commit a crime. How do they get you on the gang database? Oops, I'm not used to not used to using PowerPoints quite like this in Zoom. Here's the criteria. They can say that you admitted to being on the gang database, but they include in that looking at social media posts that they say are admissions. A recent call I got was about a youth with a laugh now, cry later tattoo. Tupac had that tattoo. Drake has that tattoo. Maybe some gang members have the tattoo, but many other people emulating these images may post them. So they say the NYPD has a unit, it's called the SMART unit, that sits around looking at kids' social media. And from that, they can say, here's an admission. The kid was in a photo throwing what we see as a gang sign. The kid had an image or colors or symbols. They say that alone could be enough. Similarly, we were hearing where you live, known group location, association with known group members. What they're saying is, if I'm hanging out with Victor all the time and he is a gang member, that can satisfy it. If we're hanging out in by the basketball court where everyone hangs out, if they say that's a gang location, that can be enough. So here we have a list of ways to get on the gang database. Not a one of them requires any criminality. And I'm going to try to just move through a few of the, a little bit more of what the NYPD specifically is doing. You know, the next question might be, well, maybe there's a limiting factor, like if the gang has to be an official gang, maybe that limits who they can put in. But they can essentially take any group of 3 or more persons, formal or in person, formal or informal, and then say individuals in that group collectively or individually ever committed a crime. So they can essentially take any group of people and say that is a gang. And in fact, their policing is mostly organized around what they say are crews. So they take neighborhood friendship groups who might make music, who might just hang out. And if they don't have their own name, they can give them a name because, hey, they do make some symbol in common or do music in common. But the gang definition allows them to put in any group. And again, we have a 99% Black and brown gang database where any fraternity should fit. You know, any kind of sports team or even band probably has, you know, members who have committed some criminal acts at some point. The definition allows them to really certify any group as a gang that they choose to. And again, there is no notice to a group, there's no ability to appeal, and there's no external review either. What happens when they say you're a gang member or even a suspected gang member? So here we're broadening the net yet again. I don't know you're a gang member. I don't even know you're a gang, but you're a suspected gang or suspected gang member. We will start surveilling you. And forgive me, this is from the patrol guide, but it's a slightly older version than the current one. I think they like took out some of the problem words like protests and marches of what gang intelligence is, but it's still broad enough to cover, you know, political activism of youth. And of course, friendship, music making, everything else. So gang intelligence is incredibly broad, and they use the fear of gang to pick people up, bring them into the precinct, debrief them, question them sometimes for hours on end about who's associated with whom. And as Kia said in the comments earlier, it should be illegal to surveil people like this, but they do it all kind of pre-case. So there's no Fourth Amendment issue. There's no judge or jury or anyone to look at what they're doing. And it's a type of policing that we need the city council, the mayor, and every bit of the community to look at. Because they use this label gang that creates fear, people are like, oh, that's okay. But if they're doing it to your kids, and they may be without any notice, it could be it's a problem. A final comment is gang databases are not exclusively New York based. There's gang database, gang matrix in London. There's a California gang database, Chicago. Just about every city in the country now seems to have a gang database. These are uniformly as flawed as the one we see here. And they lead to abuse. Dermot Shea has said, like, on average, the people in the gang database have been arrested 11 times. That's harassment arrest. And each one of those interactions is dangerous because the police are believing that they're interacting with a gang member. So wherever you look at these gang databases, and we have asked the Inspector General to do an audit of the gang database and the gang police, we see A, over-inclusive, inaccurate, and B, also abusive policing that goes along with that, and harassment. The video called this Stop and Frisk 2.0. Historically, the NYPD did a big pivot to Operation Crew Cut or gang policing when the Stop and Frisk class action was certified. So it's really a way to continue surveilling Black and brown New Yorkers, to interfere with their Fourth Amendment rights to be free of search and seizure, and their First Amendment rights to associate. So I'm really glad that this coalition is here. It's an incredibly complicated issue. We're not saying gang violence doesn't exist, but this kind of policing is no way to address it. So thank you all, and I'm clearly be here for questions later.
Thank you, babe. I always appreciate your presentation. So one thing in this criteria that we haven't gotten to yet that is a big issue is the collateral consequences of this database. Not only does the database affect you on the criminal element, and again, you don't have to commit a criminal act, right? But it can affect you with pre-sentencing, with bail, all of this stuff. It really bothers that. But when I talk about collateral consequences, I'm referring to things that's outside of the criminal element, right? We're talking about housing. We're talking about employment. We're talking about immigration status. All of these other areas that folks don't tend to see is a big problem. So another colleague that we have within the coalition, I'm just amazed that she's here as well, because this coalition is built around every aspect possible that we can think of. And I'll be honest with you, there's so much that we're still trying to learn. There's so much procedure that we still want to understand. But I want to introduce Jane Shim. Jane works on federal advocacy, state and federal advocacy, and fights for the criminalization of immigration. So I want to pass it over to Jane so she can talk about how this affects immigration status. Jane, it's all yours.
Hi, thanks, Victor. Hi, everybody. I'm Jane. I'm an attorney at the Immigrant Defense Project. I'm, like Victor just said, like there are so many different collateral consequences. I focus on immigration issues, so I'm going to speak a little bit on that and how the gang database, gang affiliation, gang accusations, and gang convictions have a gigantic impact on people's immigration status and can lead to so many different types of consequences that will frustrate their ability to stay here with their families and their communities. Just stepping back a little bit, my organization focuses exclusively sort of on the issues facing people facing immigrants who have been criminalized. And so gang issues is a huge part of that, but we also work, generally on sort of thinking about how if we're going to change the criminal system, policing systems, how to make sure that immigrants aren't left out of that equation, because often things get very complicated from them on the tail end of a criminal procedure. So, even if the criminal laws change, the immigration laws enact what is essentially a sort of double punishment after the fact. So say someone gets tied up, someone faces charges, does some time, even if they get parole and they're released, if ICE marks them a priority for removal, regardless of the fact that they've finished their sentence, they may end up again behind bars in a detention center facing deportation, depending on the situation. And so specifically on gang databases, well, I guess I'll zoom out a little bit for a second. So in terms of the immigration consequences that are attached to gang, the gang being included in the gang database, gang affiliation, gang accusations, ICE wasn't always on this like this. So, in the 80s and 90s, what you see is, first of all, ICE didn't even exist. ICE is 20 years old. It was created after the Department of Homeland Security was created in 2000, after 9/11. So in terms of the amount of cooperation and entanglement that you see between ICE and local police and prison systems, that is, a pretty recent thing. And so it's just, I like to mention that always because it's important to keep in mind that it wasn't always, that non-citizens were being criminalized in this mass way. If you think about like the volume of people who are being deported, the numbers are so starkly different just over the last 10 or 20 years. Before ICE existed, in terms of who's getting arrested by ICE and put in detention, deportation, it was a few thousand a year. And now in sort of modern times, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of people being arrested every year. So that's a little bit of background. And so these systems, it's gotten to a point where ICE really relies on the local police surveillance, including the gang database, to identify people that they're going to arrest, detain, and deport. And it comes up all the time in people's cases, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But just to give you an example of sort of what the cooperation can look like, in 2017, ICE had an operation called Operation Matador. It's pretty well known, but it was just huge sweeps of immigrant youth who had been labeled as gang involved. And there was a lawsuit over it. It came out that there was very flimsy evidence, and ICE officers themselves admitted to just using gang allegations as a pretext to be able to round people up and put them in proceedings. And then, if you think about some of the big gang raids and that have happened in New York City, the Bronx 120 report talks about how Homeland Security investigations, which is, is an arm of ICE essentially, work together with NYPD to conduct that raid. And you have to ask, why are they working together like that? Well, they have the same types of goals, which is to target and exclude and marginalize people of color. So a little bit on the details, nuts and bolts. Where does ICE even get this information? So I gave you an example of how they actually work together, out on the street. That's one way. You can, ICE officers are out surveilling people just like police are, and often they're working together with police and sharing information. In New York, a lot of people think we're a sanctuary state. In fact, a police officer, New York City has some laws around it, but police officers in other places can just pick up the phone and tell ICE that they've seen someone. They could racially profile someone and say, hey, I think this person might not have citizenship, and share information with ICE. And that's how some people do end up on ICE's radar and end up facing deportation. A lot of people, if they come in through the border, Border Patrol officers will mark whether they have, certain tattoos or things like that. And that can come up and be used against them later on if they're in immigration court as seeking status or fighting their deportation. And another thing that's come up a little bit more recently is, especially in Long Island, the school resource officers are taking notes on kids and surveilling them. We had the youth speak earlier, and they share that information with police departments, and police departments then share that information with ICE. And so there really is this pipeline, and police, local police are at the heart of it, and ICE is, very much entangled with that. Yeah, so we know that this information sharing happens because this type of flimsy evidence, whether it's inclusion in the gang database or something that happened where a kid was identified as a gang member based on their doodles or the colors that they're wearing, that shows up in immigration court, or that shows up when someone tries to apply for some kind of immigration status. So we know that the information sharing is happening. What we don't know, because the NYPD won't tell us, is whether ICE actually has direct access to this database, how much information they have access to, and they just really won't give any answers around it, which makes it even harder to kind of tackle, because we don't even know what we're working with, and it gives them leeway to just deny that things are happening on the scale that they are. And, I mentioned people can end up detained or deported. Another thing is sometimes a lot with the youth, because obviously the gang database is really impacting youth, as all the speakers have mentioned. If they're applying for DACA, which is the immigration status that's available to, so-called dreamers, gang affiliation is one of the most common things that comes up, where someone will get a letter in the mail like, actually, hey, can you give more evidence? Like, we think you might be a gang member. And they don't even know what evidence ICE has that they may be a gang member. And then they're asked to somehow rebut that information. So it's really stacked against them once they end up in there. And as others have said, you can't get off once you're included in the database. And then I'll just mention quickly one one initiative we took as a coalition together, which was to write a letter to Secretary Mayorkas, who's the head of DHS, asking him to stop marking people who are gang affiliated or who have gang related convictions as priorities for detention and deportation. So ICE comes out with this set of quote unquote priorities of people they're gonna go after, essentially, or people who are kind of, they're green lit in terms of ICE. It's presumed ICE is okay to, target these types of people, and gang affiliation is one of the factors that is in favor of someone being a so-called public safety threat that they would prioritize. So the coalition got together, we wrote a letter on all of the abuses and unfairness that's a part of the gang database, and ask them to completely, make a clean break from relying on any type of gang related conduct or allegations as a basis for ICE policing. So, we didn't get a response, but that's not the goal. But we're trying to get the word out there that both systems are messed up, both systems are working together, and that we're trying to get the information out there and stop ICE and police from doing what they're doing.
Thank you, Jane. I mean, I can't thank our team enough for all the hard work that they've put in. And this is a lot of research, folks. And we have a lot more information to give to you all. But before we move on to our next segment, we do have some time. I also want to open up for just a few questions in the meantime that maybe some of the audience members may have for some of the presenters who already went. If you do, please feel free to drop your question in the chat and we will get to them. But before we do that, I do want to break the ice a little bit. So, everyone was talking about, you heard a lot of, folks can be on this database without committing a criminal act. We've talked about the association of someone. Babe mentioned that, just because she knows me and we like to drink coffee together every Thursday, I'm the big homie, so she can be on the database. You know what I mean? But let me show you people who's not on the database that I think we all know. All right? Let's see. Do we know who these people are? Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Do I need to make it a little bigger? You know
Yes.
what? Let's click on one of these images here. Let's see. Right? Anybody know who that is?
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't, right? Thank you, Miracle. Who doesn't? This is, and I'm sharing this image because before we get to our next panel of our national folks, like Babe also mentioned, this is not just the New York City thing. It's happening all over. Our youth, our communities, Black and brown communities are being criminalized for being associated to something. But when I look at this picture specifically, when I look at these two, we've got one of the biggest Crips, not alleged, right? Self-admitted. One of the biggest Crips in LA. And we've got a federal convict. And Martha Stewart, I think we forget that sometimes because they're on TV, right? She's a convicted felon. So when we presented this criteria to you earlier of known locations and all of this stuff, we've got the biggest reputable gang member in the West Coast with a known convicted felon. Why aren't they being harassed by Cal Gang out in California? Why aren't they fighting like the folks in our communities? So I'm sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there to kind of shake us up a little bit real quick, okay? But before we do that, because they are white, I don't think Snoop Dogg white. I'm just messing with you. But it's really because there is a status difference, right? Law enforcement's not going to go up against these two because guess what? They probably make more money than the whole department put together. But that's just my opinion, right? But let me stop sharing. Sorry. I got a little carried away there. I just needed to kind of, bring it home a little bit for us, right? Do we see any? Oh, I think it's a lot of questions in the chat. Is it no questions? No questions? All right, cool. Well, listen, if there's no questions for any of the previous panelists, we can move on to our next segment. Oh, we
got a question from Shaquana. Forgive me if I'm saying that name wrong.
Oh, got it. Go ahead, Marquise. You can read it off.
All right. My question is, how do you build coalition locally from the national work you do? I am a national leader with Opportunity Youth United, and we have a hard time connecting our coalition locally. Yet we do great work pressuring Congress.
Ooh, that's a juicy question. I don't know, Marquise. I'm gonna tell you this real quick. I'm not deflecting, but Marquise is one of my mentors personally. Marquise helped me become a great organizer. So I would be a fool if I didn't let him answer that.
Thank you. You're too kind. But I actually will ask you to come off mute and kind of say your question again. Just I want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
So Shaquana, do you mind coming off mute?
Sorry, it was asking me to unmute myself. Yes, my question, what I was saying is, I do a lot of work on a federal level, and I was hearing a lot of work and a lot of coalition building on a federal level. But here in Brooklyn, I live in Brooklyn, I have a hard time connecting the work that we're doing nationally to our local organizations or even elected officials doing the work. So my question is like, how do you build your coalition locally if it's so nationally? Like, if that.
What specifically are you working on?
Juvenile justice rights, policies around the policies and programs that affect appropriation budgets, and that includes immigration rights, secondary education, national service, and military service. It's all under one line of funding, but locally we don't have any, like, I don't know how to organize with the groups that are organizing around like youth policy, juvenile justice rights or reforming. So I'm
Thank you.
Take it down.
I think I understand, and to be honest, I'm not going to give you a fancy answer. One of the big things that we do as organizers is one-on-ones. And I think the first thing to do is identify, right, the groups that you might be potentially allied with or see the relationship and the connections with your work. And then it's simply the same way we do organizing, right? You reach out to that group and schedule a one-on-one and just have conversations with them and begin to explore what those potential relationships could look like. I think the other key piece and what we try to do with this coalition is ongoing conversations. So as much as you want those individuals to participate in the things that you are doing, it's equally important that you participate in the events and the things that they have going on so that you begin to build that camaraderie between each of these groups. And then, right, for me, I'm always about putting someone to work, right? It's one thing to say I want to work with you without giving something tangible to work on. Really, it's just a good conversation that we had that doesn't go anywhere. So always be prepared always be prepared with an ask of how we can move this to the next step. Anyone else could answer. I hope that was good enough. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
I'll give one more add-on to that is, you know, with the not just the Gangs Coalition, but the organizers that we work with within the coalition. Like we said, we have numerous committees. Our base building team, what we do is we highlight the community's voices. That's what we do. We're not just advocates for our own fight. Yes, I've been personally directly affected, but how do we get folks to come behind this issue? We educate them, we empower them to talk about these issues in their own communities. Just how you seen the youth earlier present from the Youth Justice Board. You know, when we met them, they were already doing this work, but they wanted to know what we knew so we can empower them. Now they're young advocates against this database. So now they're in spaces that we may not necessarily be in. So for us, this coalition building piece is really doing as much public education as possible. But like Marquise said, also getting to work, right? We want to get tangible items that community members can honestly see or grasp. And we really want to, you know, every campaign is not going to get a win. That's just what it is, right? But we're helping empower a community to push their own agenda. Because guess what? These electeds that come on knocking on their door when it's time for a vote, they're the same ones that's going to say, well, listen, I remember we tried to call you about this gang issue and you didn't want to talk to me. So guess what? I'm not voting for you. So it's a lot of angles that we can play, but I will say one of the most near and dear pieces to me is meeting the community where they are and uplifting their voices first. I'm so sorry. See, this is why I didn't want to open up for questions yet, because now we're not going to get to all of them if you want to stay on track with our workshops. But I've seen Kia had a few questions in there. I don't want to take it yet, but I promise the folks who had those questions there, we will get to it in the open segment later. I promise you. We were doing great, and now I played myself by doing that. I shouldn't have shared the picture of Martha and Snoop Dogg. No, I'm joking. All right, so on to our next segment really quick. And again, hopefully everyone is rocking with us and you're enjoying. I know we've been on for a while, but please, please, please continue to rock with us. So I want to introduce our national panel. We've got Sean Garcia-Leas, Executive Director of the Peace and Justice Law Center and visiting scholar at UC Irvine School of Law, who helped in the LAPD's use of cow gang and helped pass gang database reform legislation in California. He'll all be on this panel. Great friend of Marquise as well. Miracle from Good Kids Mad City. And a good friend of mine as well, Anthony Posada, Legal Aid Society, all members of this coalition as well. Welcome, guys. Before we actually start the panel, I would like, even though I gave a little brief intro, I would like you all to also introduce yourselves in case I missed something briefly, then we'll start the conversation. So with that being said, ladies first. Miracle?
Hey guys, it's Miracle Boyd. I'm youth member of Good Kids Mad City here in Chicago. We are a youth-led organization focused on transformative justice and restorative justice across the city of Chicago. We want to defund CPD, soon enough abolish CPD, because we know that we could police our communities without police and keep our communities safe without police, because there's a high chance of you getting away with murder in Chicago. And it's a lot of things that are going towards CPD's budget when they should be reinvested in their community, in the youth voices. And yeah, so that's a little background knowledge. Of course, as we go along, I'll keep talking and so forth, but I'll pass it.
Thank you, Miracle. Appreciate it. Sean? What?
Yeah, so my name's Sean. I am a civil rights attorney, but also a longtime partner to gang intervention workers in South Los Angeles. I used to be a high school teacher about 20 years ago. And at that time, I taught high school in Watts. And it was really seeing the constant threat to my students from both gang violence and state violence that shaped my approach to this work. And yeah, my work on the database has really stemmed from seeing my students targeted and wanting to stop that.
Thank you, Sean. Anthony?
Good afternoon, all. It's great to be here with you all talking about this important topic. I am a supervising attorney in Legal Aid Society's Community Justice Unit. What our unit does is provide legal services and wraparound support to organizations on the ground that are working to eradicate gun violence using the Cure Violence public health approach. Prior to coming into this role, I was a public defender here in the County of Queens. I'm also a student of Professor Babe Howell, and I say that proudly. And I am in this work in large part seeing how gang takedowns and gang raids were impacting the communities that we serve through Cure Violence, and seeing that on an ongoing basis brought us closer and closer to the reality of what people were experiencing when it comes to increased surveillance, increased harassment, and not getting a response from the police about how they were doing the takedowns, why they were doing them, and helping people in that area is what propelled our unit to be a part of the coalition and to be a part of the work to come up with ideas or solutions that would be driven by the community needs. And so that's how I'm in this field.
Thank you, Anthony. So to the panelists, I'm not gonna lie, I wasted enough time today. We're gonna get right to it. Okay. I would ask, let's rotate the responses. So the same person not going first if you don't mind. But first question. I mean, obviously we've been in communication with most of you guys throughout our work, especially in New York, but we also want to highlight, there's been some notable campaigns against the use of gang databases and gang labeling in places like Chicago, California, and New York. Obviously, you're all representing in other states. But can you tell us briefly about some of your work in those cities, or your respective cities rather, and like what people look to do? Like, what have you done there to make a change there? Like, what had to happen personally, or what kind of campaign were you involved in to make the changes happen that it has happened there? Sean, let's start with you on this.
So I want to say that we've made a lot of progress in California and in Los Angeles, and we've had a lot of victories. I can't say that much has actually changed on street corners. So one of the things that happened was a legislator who's now our Secretary of State, her son was stopped while playing basketball in San Diego. Black legislator, black son, black neighborhood, and was told he was being put on the gang database. And that changed all of our work in legislation, because when that happened, we gained a champion who was able to go elected to elected and tell the story of her family, and she was well respected. And it made our capital a place where we could start making things happen. Not that right away we were going to get rid of gang databases based on that, but what it first did was it got us an audit of the statewide gang database. And then that was enough really to get us an audit of LAPD gang database. And what was revealed by both of those audits gave us more than enough concrete data to push for change. So at the state, one of the most widely reported things was that there were dozens of infants that were put on the database. Truth is, there weren't any infants. I think those were just typos in entering birth dates. But it did show that there was just a sloppiness to the whole thing that made police officers claim that this was a needed tool laughable. They're like, well, if you need this tool, why aren't you taking care of it? Why aren't you using it properly? At the local level, what we found was that there really was a quota for certain units of LAPD to put people on the gang database. So I don't want to take a lot of time, but this is a story worth telling. So there was one unit, it's called the Metro unit. It's kind of like an anti-gang unit, but it went from neighborhood to neighborhood throughout Los Angeles based on whatever the hotspots were. And the LA Times wrote a really well-meaning article, really hammering them for just really shocking racial disproportions in who this unit pulled over. So for example, it was an order of magnitude more likely to get pulled over if you were African-American in Los Angeles by this Metro unit. So what happened though, was that the response of the, let me reject this, okay. Sorry, what happened was the response was the police said, oh, we're not pulling over Black people because they're Black. We're pulling over gang members targeting specific gangs, and gangs are racially segregated. So this is not racial profiling, it's gang profiling. And gang profiling is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. So once they started making that argument, the next step was for them to document all of their stops as gang stops, not racial profiling. And that's where the quota was created, where police just started putting everybody on the gang database and lying about criteria. And there was enough body camera video to show that there was actually a practice of this. And several police officers were fired and criminally charged for lying. And their defense, and to a certain degree, it's completely correct, is I was just doing what the captains told me to do. But none of the captains are criminally charged yet. So
thank you.
So that's really what the progress we made is the state legislature, the local civilian oversight boards, they were all having a problem with this. The problem is when we try and start, even with good intentions, dividing between what is a computer database and what happens on the streets. It's really easy to change the computer database. It's very difficult to change the practices. Specifically, all of our legislation deals with shared gang databases, because we started with CalGang, which was the gang database that all the police officers had networked together. Well, nearly every police department in the state has now stopped using CalGang and shifted to an in-house non-networked computer system that evades all the accountability that's in the legislation. So, you know, there's a tit for tat. Police officers are constantly finding ways of evading accountability. So we have made a lot of wins, but, you know, the struggle continues.
Thank you for that, Sean. I want to actually come over to Anthony because I heard you mention, Sean, that, you know, you guys are already doing work, but you were able to kind of get that little catapult because of the elected son, right, of them coming on board, obviously her caring about it. So, Anthony, obviously you're out here in New York with us. Can you talk about some barriers that you may have seen during this research of the gang database, and maybe a tool that we use currently to try to help, you know, the alleged gang member myth, or the saying that everyone's gang involved?
So one thing here in New York that advocates and people that have been speaking against the gang database have constantly pointed out is that unlike in California, unlike the Cow Gang, people here don't have notice about being included into the gang database. They don't have an opportunity to appeal that designation or their inclusion in the database. And so what ends up happening is that they stay there eternally. They continue cycling in the database. And to address that lack of transparency, to address the fact that people were not being notified about being included, in the Community Justice Unit, we started this initiative called the Foil Yourself Initiative that was not the first of its kind. We actually drew a page from another effort that had been done in the past, shortly after 9/11, when the NYPD was surveilling Muslim communities, that I believe it was the American Asian Bar Association had put together, where people could submit FOIL requests to find out if they were being surveilled. And so we did a similar initiative. We went out into communities, and what happened was that we started to use that initiative as a way to educate people and tell them about the existence of the database. Through that initiative, we were also able to connect with a lot of people who had told us that they had been either informed by officers or had received something that happens here in New York City, which is called a ceasefire, which is an NYPD program where people are designated as gang involved, and they receive these letters, sometimes in the form of police officers going up to where they live, joined by clergy, to tell them, look, we're monitoring you, we're watching you, we're looking at you and your friends, and if any of you engages in any sort of wrongdoing, we're gonna come down as hard as we can. We're gonna throw the book at you. We're gonna charge you with the highest charges possible that we can, to strike fear and intimidate people. And so when we started to learn all these things by way of the initiative, what it did was give us a good opportunity to use that data and that information to continue advocating for why we needed transparency, why it wasn't enough that the police wouldn't tell people, but that it was also that we needed other forces, other entities here in New York City to get involved. And so one of those is our own Office of the Inspector General, where I know even the coalition as a whole, the Gangs Coalition, has been working to push that entity, that body, to exercise some of its audit powers to audit the NYPD's gang database. Because we know, as in other jurisdictions where Office of Inspector Generals have conducted these investigations, that they've turned up a lot of the things that Sean was just talking about, where there's a sloppiness, where there's overall gaps, where there's just patterns of abuse. And you can then use that to compel and to push further for why we need to erase the database, why it's no good to even have a database. And so that's one of the initiatives that we started. I guess one of the barriers, or one of the things that we see here, is that we didn't have a council member or somebody in the legislature whose son was impacted, but we did have when we had our very first hearing on this issue back in 2018, where the chief of detectives, who is currently the NYPD commissioner, went in to defend the use of the gang database, that we had council members there who broke down in tears just from hearing how the database could impact youth and children. We had a council member who pointed to, if, you know, him as a Black person, if he happened to be in his community, in his district, and if he went to the bodega several times and said hi to some people, would that be enough? And you have on video the NYPD chief of detectives saying, yeah, that would be enough to land you on the database based on what you're saying. And so we did have that going for us, and it did help us gain momentum around it. But obviously, it's still work that we are doing. We haven't gotten there. We haven't gotten to a place where we can have actual legislation on the books to completely prevent the use of gang databases in New York City or all throughout New York, but that's something that we continue working towards.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Miracle, you there? I want to take a brief moment. I don't want to impose on folks, but another question we have until Miracle comes back to us with Chicago. You know, we talked about all these initiatives and things that, you know, you've done to try to, you know, oh, there's Miracle. No problem. Well, let me slow a roll. I will slow a roll. Miracle, did you need me to repeat the question or you're good?
Yes, you can repeat.
All right, no problem. Yeah, so the question was, you know, tell us, we know that there's been notable campaigns across the nation in regards to the database, but can you talk about something specifically that you've done in Chicago, or the folks you work with in Chicago, to kind of make an impact on the database issue that you guys been having? Miracle? Sorry about that. I'm sure she might be having some issues, so she's moving around. So I'll come back to Miracle for that particular question. But to Sean and Anthony now, can you also talk about some maybe setbacks or proposed reforms that may have come up throughout the work? I know in New York, there's been some. I'm sure Anthony can speak to that as well. But I actually want to start with Anthony on this. Can you talk about some proposed reforms that has happened in New York, Anthony, or also some setbacks that we've come across?
So there was a proposal by the public safety chair committee that would have given notice to minors in the database. And we were not privy to how that bill came about, but I know that we very zealously pushed against it, as well as many of the other groups that are part of the Gangs Coalition, because of the obvious flaws that the youth, the minors in the database, as we understood it, just represented a small portion. And what this would have done, this type of legislation, which is something that we've always been very careful about, is that we don't want a better database. We don't want reforms that are going to make a sanitized version of the database, but are actually going to legitimize it and validate it. And so that was a reform that was rather backwards or wrong-headed, that we obviously took a very strong approach against. But I will point just this out, Victor, that probably doesn't go so much to your question, but that it's just going into a moment that we find ourselves in right now, not just in New York, but even maybe across the whole nation. And it's that at all levels of government, there is this sort of push right now to continue increasing funds to police departments on the basis that gun violence is getting out of control in the country, and especially here in New York City. So like the Biden administration recently said that states could dip into $350 billion that were allocated to see if they could, you know, shore up their police departments. Similarly, here in New York City, our council today voted to not make any cuts to the NYPD's budget and actually to increase it in some aspects. And the commissioner, right, who is the same commissioner who defended the gang database at that hearing, who is kind of a architect of precision policing, which is just a code for, you know, continued policing and increased policing over Black and brown communities. has been on this path of conflating bail reform with gun violence to justify increased gang policing practices, to call for more increase in takedowns, and to call for more cooperation between federal agencies and the NYPD. And that's something that we have been very closely monitoring because, right, it goes to the heart of the work that we're doing, but it just takes us back to when we started to put our heads around this problem when Professor Bay Powell noticed the trend that stop and frisk was being ruled unconstitutional here in New York City. And at the same time, it's when the NYPD said that it was necessary for them to engage in Operation Crew Cut, which created these units that would surveil and monitor social media activity and just include more people into the gang database. So I don't know, Sean, if you're seeing something similar there happening in California, but I did want to put that out that as we speak about this as a national panel, it's something that is going on right now and affecting us a lot.
Thank you, Anthony. Miracle, are you with us? Hopefully everything's all right. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I said I'm with you guys. You can repeat the question now.
All right, no problem. So I'm going to come right back to you, Sean, but I want to give Miracle both questions really quick, and then I'm going to come back to you, all right? So Miracle, you got a two-part question really quick. First part was in the campaign and the work that you've all been doing in Chicago, what were some tactics or things that you've been done to uplift the work around gang database? And then the second part to that was, has there been any proposed reforms in Chicago or potentially any setbacks?
Okay, that's a good idea of where to start. Okay, so myself, I'm involved with Good Kids Mad City, and we created the Peace Book Ordinance. The Peace Book Ordinance is an incentivizing tool that we want to use in our communities across the South and West Sides, because we know violence happens across wards in Chicago, and a lot of young people are being shot. 7-year-old Jasmine Adams, 14-year-old Adam Toledo. And so we want to pay community members and street factions to create peace through our wards across the city of Chicago and eventually end up making the salary. And how we would do this, we're going to take money from CPD's budget. So we asked for 2% of CPD's budget that will give us $35.2 million so that we can begin our phases across the city of Chicago. And we've been in communication with our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, because she ran this proposal in this campaign, how that she will be supportive of the youth and have more jobs for the youth and take money away from CPD. But we're not into locking our young people up. We're not into criminalizing folks. We're into getting resources for our communities and looking at the root cause of what's been going on, because everyone is like blaming the youth for what's been happening. But Lori Lightfoot came out with this new idea. And since we were in relations and in communications with her community engagement team, she stole some of our ideas and put it out where she would track intercommunal violence across wards across Chicago, and how she would track on violence happening in this specific location based on the work that's happening here in the grassroots org doing work on this specific location. And that's basically what was a phase of the Peace Book Ordinance, on how we would track when we're in our community doing this important work that's needed, what's happening and what's not happening. And we know that every time this year we were not in our community doing the real work, planning festivities for the youth to come out to, getting youth to talk to Lori Lightfoot, registering youth to vote. Every time we were not in our community doing something productive, violence occurred. Someone was shot, shots was fired. And so now we're also fighting for the ShotSpotter contract in Chicago to be abolished, because the ShotSpotter contract is like Spot News in Chicago, and they tweet out when shots fired in a specific location, and it's like it gives anxiety to the community members. We already have this app called what is it? I forget. It starts with the C.
Citizen app.
Citizen app. We have the Citizen app. I'm like, that's enough information there. But you guys keeping up the ShotSpotter contract and making these community members get anxiety based on what's happening and things happening in the city of Chicago, like that's creating stress, what we don't need. And then whoever run the page, sometimes they say names over the media, and like that can get some people hurt, and the city doesn't realize that. And the person who runs that social media page through Twitter.
All right, I don't want to. All right, I know she's in transit, so I don't want to hold us up, but I'm definitely going to come back to Miracle, because I think what she's getting at raises a great point. Sean, are you still with us, brother?
Yes, I am here.
There it goes. There it goes. So, Sean, let me just bounce over to you for that proposed reforms question, and we'll check back in with Miracle when she come back online for us. All right?
Yeah. So, on one hand, we have.
So we would have.
You know what?
Again.
Go ahead, Sean. I'm just gonna go ahead.
All right. So, so we have taken a reform approach with the goal pretty expressly internally of never settling and whenever possible trying to put poison pills into these reforms. So, so we actually, back before Secretary of State Weber became our champion, there was a bill passed that was sponsored by a group called the Youth Justice Coalition. And they got notice and removal request rights, but only to juveniles. Now, the bill started for everybody. It got whittled down to just juveniles, and Youth Justice Coalition was like, well, that's something, we'll take that. And it had no appeal rights, so there was no teeth to the removal requests. But what happened was when we came back several years later, we were able to say, look, you've had this law in effect for 5 years to law enforcement. Can you show us any ways that giving notice to these kids has compromised investigations or your ability to work? And they had nothing. So that was another thing that got a lot of moderate politicians to say, well, why would we not do this if you've got it for 5 years and you can't show any examples of how it's hurt? And then we got our first gang database bill passed, or the next one, sorry. And it gave notice and appeal rights to adults, but it did not have real teeth and there was no regulation. So then we get another bill. So it's been piece by piece by piece. Now that has led right now, like I said, all of the police departments have just stopped using CalGang and have used other non-shared gang databases. So one of the solutions to that is another bill in the legislature that says if you are going to make allegations of gang membership outside of a criminal investigation, it has to be in CalGang. And then all of those protections go into place. But that is a bill that nearly every grassroots organization who would normally support it is like, I can't support a bill that says you have to use a gang database. So we're kind of stuck on that right now. And in the meantime, without really any way to push forward on that, which really breaks down along sort of typical reform versus abolition lines. We're letting the ACLU spend a year trying to sue to end the gang database, since that requires no actual consensus amongst the grassroots. So it's been a struggle. The other thing that's I think important to think about in terms of setbacks, also our opportunities, is that the two largest counties in California, Los Angeles and San Francisco, have just elected expressly progressive prosecutors who have said that they, as a blanket rule, will not prosecute gang enhancements. If somebody commits a crime, they're going to be committed for the underlying offense, not for the fact that they were a gang member or that somehow the crime might have benefited the gang. So 30% of California is currently living in areas where there are no gang prosecutions. But both of those DAs have been targeted by well-funded recalls from national conservative groups, and it has scared the moderate Democrats in the state. So right now we have a bill going through the legislature that would have included some of these, poison pills for gang enhancements, that there were certain elements that we were adding that are completely common sense and reasonable, but would be virtually impossible for DAs to meet these burdens. And the moderate Dems are they're waiting to see which way the wind blows. If these two progressive prosecutors defeat their recall elections and another one is elected, then we're going to be able to push forward with the strategy we've had, which is sort of incremental reform that never lets up. But if either of them are recalled or nobody else gets elected, then the wind is obviously blowing against criminal justice reform, and we're not going to be able to get anything done, and we're going to be stuck with the DA saying that they've already fixed all these problems because some of these incremental reforms have been passed. So we're really sort of waiting to see what happens and trying to figure out whether or not this, incremental reform has ended as an actual viable strategy, or whether or not we should continue with it.
Thank you for that, Sean. Appreciate it. So while Miracle's trying to come back to us, let's go to the next question real quick. And this is probably my favorite question as an organizer. One thing that we always think of, and the Neo Coalition, the Gangs Coalition, we've been at it for years now. Some longer than others, some folks coming on, but we realized that, I think it was, and forgive me if I'm saying the wrong person, but I believe it was Shaquana earlier who asked about the community piece, right? The engagement part. We're always thinking of new ways to stay engaged with folks, right? I'm not gonna lie to you. The workshops we do is very informative, but we're always trying to push the envelope on that as well, because we don't want to sound redundant. We want to bring new information. We want to keep folks engaged so they can know how to protect themselves. But we also know that there are other things that bother us or affect us. So Anthony, let me start with you again, if you don't mind. What are some of the things that, at Legal Aid 2 and just working with the coalition, if you could just expound on, some ways we censor the work are in community and around community, because we all know, the biggest thing with gang database is talking to the impacted people, and not just the alleged gang members, not just the folks who are gang members or folks who've been in the criminal justice system, but the parents of the young men and women who are getting swept up in these raids, right? The employers who don't know what to do, things like that. So how do we censor the work around this in the community?
So I think for us in the Community Justice Unit, it comes as a natural extension of the work that we do. And I just go back to what I mentioned earlier of how I got involved in the coalition and the larger work to dismantle the database, which is that, right, we're supporting groups who employ people from the community, who employ the mothers, the fathers, the people who have been impacted by incarceration. And their work is to then provide services to the larger community. And so seeing them do their work, which is almost also in essence a gang deterrence program, in addition to being a program to eradicate gun violence, being undermined by the policing tactics, being impacted negatively by constant surveillance, by police officers coming in and doing the large takedowns. And so for us, it's helpful to be in the community already, because then by virtue of the organizations that we support, we can go and extend our services and connect with people, with the mothers, with the brothers, with the sisters, with the uncles, with the aunts, whose children have been impacted, whose lives have been turned upside down as a result of gang policing, and make sure that they are involved and that they are a part of the work and that their voices are actually leading. And so for us, it's never been about, right, we're gonna just go out and put together a plan of action that is going to challenge NYPD practices as they exist, because we want to do that by taking lead from the community, by knowing what exactly the community wants. And that is what helps structure and frame the way that you put together those larger plans. In essence, the work to help people connect with FOIL, which was like more of a precursor to start to build foundations for larger work to challenge gang policing practices, was an opportunity to connect to even more and more people. So for us, and I guess even the Gangs Coalition as a whole shows it, right? It's about making sure that those closest to the problem are being involved in the conversations that have to do with the solutions. And right, just building on that proverb that I hear a lot in the work that we do, which is nothing for us, anything for us without us is against us. And that's just something that I take to heart in the work that I do. And the more that I'm out in the community in the role of sort of lawyering in this format, the more I understand that my job is often to take a step back and listen and know when to be there to help people so that they can be in those places, so that they are the ones who are driving the initiatives, and as well as being part of the solutions, and not so much an attorney who immediately puts their agenda, inputs their privilege, and dictates the way things have to go. So at least that's the approach that we've taken here in New York City, and we hope to keep it that way so that we're true to the roots of making sure that the people are at the center of the solution.
Thank you, Anthony. Sean, you want to jump on this answer before we go back to Miracle?
Yeah.
Miracle, I'm letting you know I'm going to overload you with all the questions, so be ready for us. Go ahead,
So
Sean.
everything that Anthony said, I think I'll add two things. One is what I have seen now that we've got, 10 years of building relationships across California with different organizations is people in these different organizations have relationships that have matured and built trust. And one of the things that I've seen that's been most powerful, a practical example of that, is this gang enhancement statute we're working on. There's two work groups, one focused on the politics, which typically would always be the community group sponsors, and one group on drafting amendments and looking at case law, which was typically like just attorneys. But what's happened is over the last 5 years is several people in these grassroots groups have gone and gotten law degrees and are now joining the law group, but are still as connected to the grassroots organizing as they ever were. And more of the attorneys, myself included, have spent time working in grassroots organizations. And so understanding that. So while we have these two work areas that used to be really discrete groups of people, we now have the same work groups, but the people are able to move back and forth between them. And that's been really helpful. The second thing is hearing some of what Anthony said about the attorneys really putting impacted people first. Yes, although I have to say that there have been times when in California, when the lawyers and the impacted people have disagreed on things like exact language of a statute. And the lawyers said, okay, we're gonna let the impacted people lead, even though they clearly don't know what they're talking about as far as how these words are going to be interpreted in court. And it ended up going as badly as it could have. One of our bills was just completely gutted by the appeals court because they said, well, the plain language of the law says X, Y, and Z, which is exactly what we knew they were going to say. And it made the entire statute like really virtually meaningless. So the respect has to work both ways. But I think the way you get that respect is not by saying, the attorney is saying, I'm an attorney, I'm the expert, you should listen to me. It's by building that expertise widely. So that, if we had that argument now, there would be several people in the community groups that have the JDs that would be like, oh yeah, no, he's right. You've got to think backwards from what an appeals court judge would say. And it wouldn't even been an argument now. Everybody would be just much more clear and trusting of the people who are coming from the different backgrounds and their particular scopes of expertise.
Gotcha. Thank you, Sean. Miracle, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, perfect. So listen, you got the first two questions. The last piece of this question that folks was answering was, how are we centering the work in the community? So floor is yours for a while. I'll stop you when I need to, but floor is yours. Do you need me to repeat anything? You're on mute.
Censoring the work, I'm not understanding. We don't censor the work. Like, we're a grassroots org.
No, censored.
For the young people. We do mutual aid for the young people. We pressure our older people. We pressure Mayor Lori Lightfoot. We take over City Hall. I feel like there shouldn't be any censorship because the youth, we are the future. Like, we got to be the ones to take the steps when our adults and our grandparents, adults, mentees can't, or they won't, or they don't believe in us. So I don't feel like it should be any censorship, and we don't censor anything. We don't spare Lori Lightfoot.
Miracle. Not censor, to put it like censor the community work.
Oh, so we censor the community work. we organize with organizations that are like in partnerships with us already. And I forgot the young man said, like, you go to their events, they come to you guys, you build a partnership. And then when you feel like you have an idea that you want to bring to the public attention or that you need like supervision on, I wouldn't say like supervision, I would say like capacity wise, or like try to get people to like understand it, or like publicity wise, it's organizing with grassroots collabs and being the voice that people are afraid to be, and organizing with orgs that are already doing the work on the same page as you. And we're not working with police and not criminalizing our young people.
Nice. So with that said, earlier you were talking about the work in general and talking about some possible reforms that may have come out. Do you want to come back to that really quick before we go on to our next segment?
Yes. So Lori Lightfoot, our mayor, when we introduced her our peacebook ordinance and we were talking about how we were going to track crime throughout our neighborhoods based on the work we were doing, she came out with a task force. The article came out and we was like, so I know she did not just whitewash our idea and steal it. And so basically she talked about how she would track
Miracle, we're losing you.
And so we're stationed with community orgs that are doing similar work, invited to that conversation. So she left. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
So Lori Lightfoot, our mayor, she left us out of a conversation she had with a few orgs yesterday, community-based orgs, and basically they were in some ways doing the same work we were doing, but in the policing lens, and we're not looking at anything in the policing lens. So our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, we've been in communication with her, and yesterday she had a meeting with community orgs, and she left us out of conversation once again. And she knows who I am. She knows the work our org does. Her community engagement team have been in relations and in conversation with us and have been hearing our ideas. And so she, on her own, has stolen some of our ideas and whitewashed them into her own. And I'm happy to share the links with you all so you guys can see what I'm talking about specifically, because
please do.
She basically like trying to throw us under the bus and steal our ideas and fund it in a way where it's not coming out of the police's budget. And we do want the funding for our org to come from the police's budget, because at the end of the day, we're about abolishing CPD.
Thank you, Miracle. I hate to cut this short, but we just do have to move on. But what I do want to encourage Anthony, Sean, and Miracle, please, the three of you all, if you don't mind, if there's any way that we can support nationally, or if there's links that you think we can read up on and share, please drop them in the chat so we can keep that and hold it down for you all. If there's a FOIA request, Anthony, Miracle, if you want to share the report that just happened, Sean, if there's other things that we can support, national, put it in the chat and let's save it for the people. I appreciate the three of you again for your time. Miracle, please be careful out there. I see that you already hitting the streets, so you out and about. Sean, we're looking forward to talking, having more conversations with you and working. I see Decriminalize neighborhoods. Appreciate it. So with that, again, I want to thank our national panel, Anthony Posada, Sean Garcia-Leas, and Miracle Boyd, for taking the time and jumping on with us all. All right, guys, we're at that part of the segment where it gets a little crazy. I know, and I also want to thank everybody. I think we still have a high volume of folks attending this, and I know we've been on for a long time. So I want to say thank you to you all for taking time out to make this important for your day. So with that being said, we're going to just move right along so we can get this rocking. Our next segment is the criminalization of hip hop and street culture. You got a piece of it earlier when folks are talking about the criteria and how it operates as far as social media, but even hip hop. We've got three great presenters here that's going to speak to that. I'm not going to take up much time. Terrence T.C. Muhammad from the Hip Hop Caucus, Dejan Cross from Hip Hop Caucus, and my man, good friend, the Gaza himself, Craig Lewis, my man from RTG, and also impacted person arrested in the Bronx when 20 out the Bronx. So TC, take it away, my guy. And good to see you again, big bro.
Good to see you. And it's Man, this conversation is really deep. And, you know, I was, when Marquise reached out, I was like, how can we talk about this? How can, you know, sometimes we be in our little silos, and our president, Reverend Yu, will always say, we trying to break down the silos. We try not to be in our own pocket of this work, and try to how we can connect one another. So, you know, I was on here before talking about it, and I was talking to Marquise. I said, you know, we don't necessarily, we do climate stuff, we do voter registration stuff, we do civil rights stuff. We're not necessarily just in that. But then I had to break down to myself, and just for this whole conversation, is that the reality is that all of our work is intersected, right? And we have to see it as connected. So when I think about climate, me and Cross from the Hip Hop Caucus, we do this thing called Climate Friday on WPFW. And we talk about how, you know, climate change, as we can see the weather and all that. But we also started to want to have a conversation about environment, how is the environment changing, and what's the environment going around in our communities and what it looks like. So, you know, when you may in LA, you in New York, you may be in different environments, you may be in different situations. But the reality is that when we talk about the gang policing, then we talk about the school to prison pipeline, because you can't talk about gang policing and not talk about the school to prison pipeline, because how does it start? It starts with the labeling of our children, labeling of their children, that they're mentally ill, that they really can't sit still. And so we started to label them, and then we started to give them on drugs. So you're talking about drug dealers on the street corners, but you ain't dealing with the drug dealers of the pharmaceuticals that are drugging our children. And by the time they get out of the school system, they can't even get a job, right? So then when you start dealing with the other labeling of just how we are as far as culture, and we're seeing not only the labeling of the gang task force, we're seeing labeling of what police want to label when they want to come out and shoot us. So they label, this is a threat, you are a threat. So like for me, when I go in the hood, I feel okay. But if I go, and I remember literally being in a white neighborhood, right, prestigious white neighborhood, and started running, I was jogging, I had to stop myself, no, whoa. They don't know you here. You better start walking, walk slow. In the hood, I felt cool running, but in this neighborhood, but the reality is that where is the criminalization and where is the demonized? And so when we talk about this gang policing, and how they want to, you know, as somebody put in the chat, a young just put in the chat, it's the whole system of profiling. So I want to try to figure out how do we connect these struggles? How do we connect these fights? Because, you know, even in the climate movement, when fossil fuels, and we call them real gangsters, fossil fuel companies, and they want to label where they want to put their pipelines, and they want to go into the vulnerable communities. They want to run their pipelines, put their power plants in certain communities. So I'm trying to kind of like have this larger conversation, because when we start talking about voting and talk about representation, then we have to really start looking at the numbers of who's doing what, and what are their policies around this, because we understand that the gang policing is just another way of corralling us all in one, so we can throw a larger sentence on a group of people all at once. So we can corral you so the private and prison industrial complex can make more money, right? But if you don't connect it to the larger thing, like, so who's paying, who the fossil fuel people are paying off in the politicians, and which one of these politicians got privatized prisons? So then you start to kind of look at who is supporting gang policing and who is. So if I work for the Marriott, I got a plan, I got a marketing skill to make sure everybody's coming to the market, to the Marriott. So why don't we think that there's a marketing plan, there's a plan, economic plan, not just a plan, but an economic plan to make sure that the prisons stay packed, stay filled, and there's a recidium and there's a revolving door. So that's a part of it. So with the Hip Hop Caucus, and Cross is going to talk about some of the things that from the caucus, as we have seen over the years, how certain hip hop artists are labeled, especially on tour. And the sad thing about it, we haven't seen a whole lot of this, you know, on a national scale, because not everybody's been touring. So you may not see it as much as we used to do in the hip hop community on tours. But I literally remember being on tour and cops running up, you know, on a tour bus, or running up on a concert, or just coming literally in the Coliseum and serving warrants for people, and then putting stuff down, and start this whole process of labeling. And so the whole thing about gang policing, I just want to kind of close and bring the other panelists, it's a whole system of profiling. And once they can put a label on you, then they can do the next phase of what they want to do. And I think the reality is us looking at, you know, at like you said, the sister in Chicago, and I love the sister from Chicago, because we got to press our politicians, and we got to press those that empower they can have to actually change some of these laws. And that's part of the defunding police process. That's part of, you know, taking money away from why are you policing, why are you profiling, why are you locking these folks up? So when you're making this whole database to intentionally say these are criminals, to lock them up, then we need to defund those kind of programs. We need to defund this labeling of people to criminalize them so that you can put them in a criminal institution. But I throw it over the cross. Oh, my fault.
Actually, before you do that, let me do a little bit of introduction and kind of set you up. When we talk about, for those of you who don't know, my name is Marquise Jenkins. I'm a community organizer, and I have the honor of moderating this conversation. So I'm going to start us off. Just when I think about gang policing, the first thing that comes to mind is the criminalization of who we decide to socialize with, but also our the way we express our identity, from the clothes that we wear to the way that we speak to the songs that we play. And so the hip hop community, right, or the hip hop culture has been targeted and blamed for the way in which our kids behave. Right. So what I want to do with part of this conversation, right, is talk about the facts and the myths. So, Cross, as you're introducing yourself, tell me a little bit, or dispel this myth, right? Is it the hip hop community that is dictating culture out in the streets, or is it vice versa? Is it just that the music is reflecting what is going out in the streets?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is DeJuan Cross. I'm the music supervisor for the Hip Hop Caucus, and I'm a music producer, engineer, and all that good stuff. So yeah, to answer your question, Marquise, yes, definitely the culture is a reflection of the streets, first and foremost. And that's what sells out here. You know what I'm saying? It's like a double-edged sword. You know what I mean? Like they love our culture, they love our music, they love our dances. I don't know if you've been seeing, even now, Black TikTok creators have been going on protests because they're not getting credit, not getting paid, right? So, you know, what happens is in music, and just from it's local and it's national. It starts where you know these artists are from. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and right before and I heard earlier we was talking about the gang database and everything like that, right? So right before pandemic hit in Georgia, that became a thing. Like right in February 2020, they had released the list and the access of all the, you know, quote unquote gang members in Georgia, and started the same list. These are the same lists that we've known in hip hop. Is like, you have the hip hop police that follow artists around. So it starts locally. So when these artists start touring and going to different cities, they're just passing this information along to the authorities. I've been on tours and everything where, you know, they've stopped us, you know, artists that I've been with, not necessarily myself, but artists that I've been with from performing, you know, because they say, hey, you know, you're going to incite riots and things like that. So it stops money, it's racial profiling, you know, it's just putting people in a bad situation. So yeah, it's definitely started in the streets, and then it goes to the industry, and then, you know, they target artists that may have, you know, pending cases and things like that going on purpose, right? So that it brings like a credibility and a legitimacy to, you know, the music and to that label or to whoever, right? So then these artists get indicted, or, you know, something goes on, and then these labels, you know, they made all this money. Bobby Smurda is a good example of that, where they don't even really help in the defense. So then you go, you know, so now you lose your rights. Once, a lot of people don't know that in these contracts that they're doing nowadays, they're even saying it that if you, you know, get arrested or things like that, then, you know, you're losing rights to your music. So it's like, to go back to what TC was saying before about the you know, about the pipeline. It's become a pipeline in the music industry to where they're looking for, they're targeting certain people that are on these lists to sign them and to, to gain access to their money, to their royalties. They go to jail. You don't hear from them. It's happening in so many cases right now that's going on right now. Casanova's locked up right now. It's just so many artists that are being targeted. So yes, they want it. It starts in the streets. It gets, mainstream. It goes to the, the suburbs, and everybody loves it. But they don't take care of the artists. They don't really look out for the artists. It's really just like you said, just another system of, how they just keep the same thing going on.
But let me jump back in here, Marquise. One of the things that you just said, one of the things we got also, and I said that's a whole system that, it's like, so it was an announcement today, and it's crazy that they said Bill Cosby may be released, and everybody's like, oh, he's about to be released. Put Cosby show back on TV, put A Different World back on TV, right, on regular air, because it was like when you snatched him out, then you snatched all this good television. And I'm using that is because at one point, conscious hip hop was all on the radio. The 90s, some people say the golden age of hip hop. It was this consciousness, people going to black colleges. We were doing the dang thing. It was wonderful. So a lot of times what happens in hip hop, we blame the artists, but we don't even know who actually runs the hip hop community, who's running radio, who's running the labels, and what execs are actually running this actual thing. So now the record exec can say, well, that conscious, we'll do that on your second album. But on this first one, kill, 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 murder, murder, murder as much as you want, and we'll pay you that. So at one time, hip hop did have a conversation where we was reflecting what was in our community that we were sharing on the radio, but now they are crafting and engineering, socially engineering what's on the radio to push out into the community, and we're reflecting what's on the radio more so than what's really in the community. And then that starts to lead to more drug sellers, more this and more this. And the industry don't care about it, because if they really cared about it, they wouldn't play this on the radio. They wouldn't be signing nobody with this, because there's a lot of artists that don't just get signed. So that continues with the whole line and setup of then you got the drug sale. And then, like I said, it's wicked and it's an evil plan. When Cross just said they put it in your contract, if you get arrested, and they already know what lifestyle you live in, that we can take the rights of your music. Because they were doing it they were doing it to our forefathers anyway. Good R&B back in the day, those artists didn't get no royalties and they didn't get no money. And like I was watching Frank and Lemon the other night, and the dude said, yeah, I signed my name as writer of this music so I can get his music. So all of this is connected, and it's not disconnected. When we talk about this gang policing, that whole profiling is a big business, so they can make you criminalized, so they can use you. And that's what they used to tell us about us. You're not human, so we can kill you. You can kill animals, but you murder human beings. So you're not a human being. So we are just killing all of y'all off as herds, because we don't even see you as human. And then what happens is they give the community this feeling like, well, the police will justify because they are gangsters and they're criminal. But we don't look at all of the gangster moves that are done on Capitol Hill and those politicians that are doing gangster moves. Because Bush was a gangster when he said Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but I'm going to drop bombs on anyway. I can't find nothing over there, but I'm still going to drop bombs. I'm going to still go to war. That's gangster. That's gangster when I can determine what your minimum wage is. And that's gangster when I can determine that I can raise your electricity and you ain't got nothing to do about it. That's gangster. But we don't profile them. We don't arrest them.
Right. And then TC also, just to jump right back in there.
Yeah,
you're 1,000% correct. I deal, I deal with artists daily, all the time, right? And so I've come across artists that have made, like when I've discovered them, they've made like political music about the environment, stuff like that, right? And then when I meet them, it's a whole different artist. So in one case in particular, I asked, hey, like, what's up, man? Like, let me ask you a question. Like, why, like, what made you change, from doing the more political, the activism music to like, kind of like more of a turn up music? He's like, well, ain't nobody listening to that. You know what I'm saying? And so what that made me understand is that even the artists that particularly might want to do maybe conscious music, they're falling to the marketing too, to understand that in order for me to change my situation, change my life, help my family out, then I might have to, kind of go into a different route of music where I wasn't naturally there. I may have to, you know, dress a certain way, look a certain way. And then that goes back to what we were talking about with the profiling. So now everybody's in this group. Just because I wear a certain color hat, just because I, you know, I might got some gold teeth, I might got some chains or whatever. Now I'm all of a sudden grouped into a category but that's our culture. And so what happens is they don't really understand our culture. They, you know, they love it because it sells, but they're scared of it. They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. You know what I'm saying? At the same time. So I think that it all goes back into the marketing of this is going to sell for us. We don't want to be close to it, but it helps us kind of group and categorize everybody and that looks, talks, performs this way so that we can kind of keep tabs on who we believe are the gangsters, criminals, or however they want to categorize it.
But the hip hop caucus is pushing back on that narrative, right? Our criminalization, our culture is being criminalized, but here you are as the hip hop caucus using cultural expression to move issues. Can you talk more in detail about how the hip hop caucus is using hip hop culture to move different issues like climate justice?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a bunch of ways, and Cross will jump in with our podcast that we call The Coolest Show, and we also do a show on WPFW 89.3 in DC, where we have a lot of these issues. But one of the things I will go back and talk about is we had a album called Home, Heal Our Mother Earth, and Neo was on it, Common was on it, and there was a song that Common did called Trouble in the Water, and we used that particular song to deal with the issue in Flint. Vic Mensa from Chicago went with us out to Standing Rock with our indigenous brothers when we was fighting against the No Dapple pipeline. We've been in Flint with also Vic Mensa, and we've been in different places trying and just with like T.I. and doing our Respect My Vote campaign, 2 Chainz, and using 2 Chainz and T.I. and 2 Chainz were ex-felons, and 2 Chainz was going into different states and reminding folks that you had the right to vote after you have served your time and paid your fine. So using the culture and using their prestige and their own personal stories to help people to realize that you can get back into the political process. But we have done a lot of things. We worked with Taboo of the Black Eyed Peas, and he did a song called Stand Up, Standing Rock that won the VMA. So we're wanting to use, because the reality is in the Black community and the Black church is still a very significant place where people learn and get motivated. The reality of today, though, not that the Black church is not significant, but the reality today is that our young people are listening to hip hop artists. So how can we take our hip hop artists and utilize those platforms to get the word out? So as we saw the Grammys, and I saw my good friend Tamika Mallory was able to use that platform at the Grammys to get a word out about the state of emergency. So we're trying to use, because now hip hop is global, it's worldwide. And so how do we get these messages out? How do we tell the narrative? How do we tell the story? And hip hop is that vehicle. And it's also the vehicle of resistance. It's always been that vehicle of resistance. So we try to make sure that we do like Chuck D said, we want to be the CNN of the people.
Yeah, and also like to go with TC said, we produce, well, I'm the producer of our podcast with Rev Yearwood called The Coolest Show. And basically, even with me coming into this side, because I'm from music straight up. So my introduction to the Hip Hop Caucus was through the Home Project, which TC was talking about. But through that, I was able to learn, just so many different things. So my brain just automatically started understanding that, well, most of the people that I know don't know anything about this, or don't know that how any of these issues really affect them day to day in their community, things like that. So I wanted to bring a realness and an organic, just an understanding of, hey, the reason some of y'all got asthma is because y'all grew up around these plants, and it's not you, it's generational. So that's why your cousins got eczema. That's why everybody in your family sick, because everybody stayed at grandma's house, and grandma lived right beside this refinery or this, or this waste plant or something like that. And so once I started learning that, even like in my circles of just working every day with artists, we're including this stuff in our dialogue and our conversations. It's just, I think it's just, it's, and also with the Hip Hop Caucus, is being able to talk straight, to our community about these issues, and bring it in a way, like TC said, we can have the artists and influence the culture. We've also begun to start incorporating, you know, independent artists and people like that that are doing this music or doing the kind of what we call artivism, you know, which is art and activism at the same time. So we've been creating spaces for these artists to, you know, to thrive with our platform. Whether it's, you know, we're doing a documentary right now about the Hampton Roads area, and, you know, basically it being the next you know, New Orleans, if there was a category 3 storm to hit that area, you know what I'm saying? So, but we're also, so we're educating people in that area, but also looking for other areas in the States, around the world, where we can just really bring these messages to our folks and let them know that it does affect you. Because like we go back to marketing again, it's been marketing as polar bears, and it's been marketing as you know, just recycling some plastic, and which is all necessary, you know what I'm saying? We got to make sure that we clean up and be sustainable. But at the same time, we got to know that a lot of this stuff is systematic, is legislation, and, you know, voting and all of that stuff matters in order to change. So that's, you know, that's a few ways we've been using our platform.
Thank you. I want to dig even deeper into it. We had a question earlier about how do we engage potential local partners and engage the community overall. Now, I know that you guys mentioned a lot of like big stars that you work with, but part of your essence, as you were saying, is working with everyday young people, right? Can you walk me through? I'm a young person. You just recruited me. Walk me through the process and how I'm able to sort of become a fighter at the Hip Hop Caucus.
You know, one of the things, you know, it's a couple of, let me back up first. One of the things that we don't want to do as an organization is go into a community and say, this is what we're going to do in your community. That's the thing that we don't want to do. We always want to be invited into the community, and then we want to do an analysis of what the community want, what the community need. And that's just from my activism role, where I went door to door. We may have gone that we need to deal some with education and city council, but when I go door to door, the community will let me know what I need, right? And I was actually doing an interview today, and somebody said, somebody want to be an activist, what should they do? And one of the things I said, accept your own and be yourself. I said, the first thing about being an activist is be who you are. Because sometimes everybody wants to say, oh, I want to be a frontline activist. No, I don't want everybody on the front line. I used to tell folks, man, go get a job and help pay for this. This is before I had a job and I was just out in the streets. Get a job to help fund the revolution. Or I need somebody to video it so we can have a documentary. Or I need somebody to write about it so we can have the correct history in it, right? So I think part of this conversation is when young people come into the space, you know, finding out what they want to do, and then trying to find room in our assembly or in our organization to allow them to be whoever they are. And then we got to try to find out what are the resources to make that happen. We used to have these things called leadership committees, and it wasn't more so we would have our national campaigns, but we would also listen to that was on the ground and what they was doing. One of our brothers, Cess45, started an anniversary for the Katrina March because on the first one, he noticed that none of the people in the community were speaking. All these national folks were speaking. So he wanted a place where the community could speak. So we allowed him to lead that, and we supported with resources and time to help that be successful. And we still there. We were there last year for the 15th anniversary. We'll be there for the 16th anniversary. It's more about what is the cry of our community and how can we lend our vehicle and our platform to help. So I think the question is, what is it that they need? What are the resources that we can connect with, whatever that request is, to help them. But fundamentally, it's really about when a person, it's almost like a child. If they want to be a certain thing, then we try to bring them into that area. So I know some people that want to be in the music business. So I take them to an artist, or I take them to a producer, or I take them to a studio so they can learn the business. And so they can see how it works if that's what they want to get in. And I think that's the biggest thing that we try to do. And I think we need to do more of the training of activism, because there's a lot of people out here that's just doing stuff. And it's very detrimental to them because we are putting ourselves in harm's way at times without self-care. or without the proper resources that we need to make sure we're effective in the work that we're trying to do.
Yeah, and like we were saying before, with our platforms like the podcast, our radio shows, everything that we do, we're uplifting the voices of the voiceless, right? We're all about Black liberation. We're about connecting folks who need resources, like even on the podcast, like what we talk to so many like grassroots organizations and people out here actually doing the work, and we're asking them, what do you need? You know what I'm saying? Is it just money? Is it the connection, relationship? So however we can kind of facilitate, that's what our whole purpose is. Like we use these platforms, we ask the tough questions, and then we at the end we always find out how we can help in whatever way that is. So
thank you guys so much for coming in today. I truly do admire the work that you all are doing because I think it's a critical piece of our work. Too often the hip hop community gets blamed for what's going out on the streets, when again, the hip hop community is simply a reflection of what's going out in the street, and they tell our story. And you all take it a step further and put that art into activism, as you say. And so I really want to thank you so much for being a part of this coalition and lending your voice to this issue. And I look forward to continuing these conversations with you all. Please drop your information in the chat box. I'm sure that others want to continue this conversation and figure out how they can get involved with the Hip Hop Caucus. So I'll pass the mic on. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all need to come on the show on Climate Friday, on one Friday. So
don't tempt us, PC.
Up there. All right. And all I'm saying, we're gonna make that happen. Maybe next Friday we may have to bring y'all on. We just have a conversation. And I say that, and I don't mean to take up time, but we have to open up our doors where we have the ability for the voice to be heard wherever it can, because somebody said earlier, sometimes we think that everybody knows this is going on. If it's not in the major news cycle, the reality, unless you're a part of this, a lot of folks just don't know. So we got to put it in as many airways as we can. So we're going to talk about the climate of gang policing on Climate Friday. Let it be known. We're going to make that happen. All right.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. I love it. We're here for it too. Again, I want to thank Cross, want to thank TC for your time. Thank you, Marquise, for moderating that. That was an amazing conversation. And just like Marquise said, man, my admiration just went out the damn roof, to be honest. I was literally sitting here taking notes, like, good Lord. But we want to open up this space now for the attendees here. And again, we've been on for 2.5 hours. That's a long time to be sitting in place. I appreciate everyone that's still on rocking with us now. And I want to open this floor for questions for any of the panelists, any of the speakers that's spoken. But I also want folks to think of your questions as, how does it affect you? Because I think sometimes, if anything, we need folks to understand that this database is very inclusive. It can touch anybody, any way, any shape, any form, unfortunately. So I'm asking you, any questions you want to ask us, please, you can drop it in the chat. I would say unmute yourself, but we kind of want to get to folks as they come through. But please, think about it, because we're also looking for members. We're also looking for community members to join the coalition. It doesn't have to be as intense as what we do, but having coalition members with us that's impacted in the community or not impacted, it means a lot, because just like TC said, some people only know when they're doing the work. So with that, please, any questions, drop them in the chat. If I don't see no questions, I'm gonna just keep running my mouth.
Hey, Victor, no, we had some questions that we had to bypass earlier from Kia and from Mercedes Jennings, if she's still with us.
Got you. Yes, I did see Mercedes had her hand up. We're gonna get to that, babe. We'll get to that. Well, actually, while we're waiting for the questions, let's actually scroll back to those questions. Sorry. And again, I can't thank everyone enough for still staying on and rocking out with us. It really has been truly amazing to be with you all. All right. Kia's question. One of the questions was, other cities have reportedly ended their gang databases. What is the status of the investigation by the Inspector General for the NYPD of NYPD's gang database? But to answer your question, Kia, unfortunately right now, so the way this works is we don't technically know, like we don't work with the Inspector General's office. We brought the issue to them. We've met with them. They've met with us. They've called folks. They've reached out to other folks to kind of get more of the story. What we've been doing as a coalition is holding them accountable. So right now we have not received a report yet. That's something why we're continuously doing this outreach, doing this awareness campaign, because the more community members know about it, the more you are all outraged behind it. That means more action, right? That means more folks can call his IG's office, tweet to the IG's office or whatever, and hold them accountable for this report. I don't believe Miracle mentioned earlier, but even Chicago, they've got 2 reports written already. You heard Sean say they've got a report. So that's something that for the coalition and the folks who this is impacting, we really need that report. So unfortunately, the current status is we believe they're working on it, but we can't attest to exactly where it is at this particular moment.
You want to go to Mercedes?
All right.
You want to go to Mercedes?
Yes, is Mercedes still with us? I don't know if she had a question in the chat.
I just saw Mercedes. Mercedes Janice, can you find her in the chat and unmute her?
Yep. Oh, here we go. Got you. Mercedes, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, I don't want to hold up too much. Mercedes, please, if you're there, just shoot a little quick text in the chat to let us know you are back with us. Or you can unmute yourself. All right, let's go ahead and move on for now. So I'm really going to be pushing because, you know, as we're typing questions, I guess we could throw some of our stuff in there. Josemar, you want to talk about the IG rally real quick since we brought it up?
Sure. Let me bring up the flyer on the screen real quick. So
as we're waiting, as we're waiting for questions and things, we think it would be a good idea instead of waiting for closing, since we can all interact with each other. Because listen, we all family now. I just want y'all to know that we all family, okay? But while we're waiting, Josemar's going to talk about another action that we have coming up.
Yes. So as everyone knows, for the last almost year and a half, you know, it's been the pandemic, and it's been a little tough for people to meet in person. So next month, we're going to do our first in-person rally since the pandemic started. And today will be one of the last times we'll do a virtual gathering like that. We'll try to start to transition to more in-person stuff as conditions get better. But next month, we're going to do a rally outside of the Inspector General's office. The IG is the office that has the power to subpoena NYPD to do actual audits, like what is done in other cities. So we're going to be doing a big rally, and we'd like for people who feel comfortable with showing up. We're going to ask people to be safe, but also to help us bring a lot of the concerns that we've laid out tonight and during the last couple of webinars we've done in the last about 8-10 months, to actually bring it in front of the office of the Inspector General and demand the report and the audit that we've been asking for quite a while, so that we can have a better view of all the problems. We at the coalition believe that of all the things that we know that are wrong, we probably still only know only a piece of the problem. There are probably other things that we are probably equally as outraged about. And so we need these Inspector General's office to do their work and to do the job that their office was created to do, and actually audit and take a look at the practices and give the public more transparency and insight into what the cops are doing. So if you can, July 27th, Tuesday, July 27th, we're going to be rallying at 80 Maiden Lane, which is downtown Manhattan. And there's a park just across the street right in front of the Inspector General's office. And we're going to be reiterating the call to erase the database, but also for the Inspector General's office to complete its investigation and publicize the investigation of what the NYPD has been doing with gang policing.
Thank you, Josimar. Really quick, I want to just jump to the chat. If folks are seeing this, Sean Wilson, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you joining us, and I appreciate you sharing your message. Do you mind unmuting yourself, Sean, and you can just say what you just said, if that's okay?
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you loud and clear, brother.
Okay. Yeah, thank you all for having this amazing event, and I see you all are doing great work, and I'm just happy to be here. So I'm originally from Southern California, and so I'm actually in the gang database in LA, and so I know what it's like, having to navigate being labeled and the impact, right, that comes from that, the collateral consequences, which you all have spoke about. And so currently I'm a criminal justice professor at William Patterson University, which is across the Hudson in Wayne, New Jersey, which is actually right next to Patterson, New Jersey. And so I do a lot of like on the ground advocacy and research around gangs, reentry, some of the challenges that formerly incarcerated people experience navigating reentry, and also, gang members' challenges with navigating reentry. And also, what you all have spoke about today with what I call racist policing. We got to call it what it is. It's racist policing. And so I just really want to, I guess, lend my expertise and be involved with the work that you all are doing, because I do similar stuff in Patterson, in Jersey City, LA, and also New York. And so I just want to, be involved in any way that I can. You all are doing some amazing things. And I'm actually inspired and motivated, after attending this today. So I just, want to thank everybody who have been in the streets. And like you all have mentioned, the importance of centering people who have the lived experience, because oftentimes, I've found in academia, especially in criminology and criminal justice, we have people writing about gangs who don't really have the lived experience, who don't really know what they're talking about. And oftentimes they publish research that criminalizes, stigmatizes, and supports racist policing practices. And so I really think it's important to really ground people who have the direct lived experience, whether they're directly involved in a gang, or whether they have family members or friends, or whether they live in communities, right, that are over policed. So I just really want to thank everybody for putting this together, and I'm happy to be in attendance, and I would love to learn more and possibly be involved with this group.
Thank you for that, Sean.
Sean, definitely put your email in the chat as well. One of us will reach out to you.
Will do.
TC, you was about to say something, TC?
Yeah, man. What he just laid out, I love every last bit of it. And I think that's the narrative. What he just said is that we got a lot of people talking about stuff and don't even know nothing about stuff. And that's what I'm saying. When you in this movement, we need to tell our own narrative and our own story. And one of the things we keep saying gangs, but some people just say it's just street organization, it's a family. So like I literally remember, I don't even curse and yell, and I was in a mall, and the police ran up on us and said, "It was too many of you gathering, so you have to move out." And we have forgotten. So when we don't get involved in the gang policing, then when it comes to us in the Black Lives Matter, quote unquote, movement, then we don't look for nobody to help you, because don't we forget, there's just a couple of years ago, they was calling the Black Lives Matter folks and different folks that I know are friends, Black extremists. And not only did they call them Black extremists, they said this one is from this city, this one from this city, this one from this city. And not only that, going even a little bit deeper, a lot of my folks were getting, we already know we got the trolls, but then getting the death threats. So not only when you're doing the gang policing, and then you're actually putting targets on real people's chests. So that's a gang member. So we are saying now that this is a potential violent person, a threat, so you're going to kill. So me as a Black man, I'm already a threat. And a Muslim, oh, you a Muslim man, you Black? Oh, we're going to shoot you and ask questions later. And the whole part of the voting piece, and we talk about the re-entry, we also got to be watching the jobs that our brothers that are returning citizens are coming home. And we're trying to make it a right to have returning citizens so they can have the opportunity to come home and have all their rights restored. But now they're trying to take the ability of what kind of job, so you can't make real money. No, you got to go get a job from somebody, and we got to test you, versus you want to be a barber, you have your own barber shop, there are certain things and certain skills and trades that certain states don't even let them have. So now you're police, you're labeled, you're locked up. And here's the other catch of it. You can be labeled by wrong policing, locked up for a charge you didn't commit, but while you're in the system, catch a charge, and then you're in the system. You know what I'm saying? So all of that stuff is playing in it, and we got to be very careful and watch that. And everybody's different. Well, no matter of fact, let me say this. It's not different because what's in LA, they using Patterson. They ship that stuff around because I know law enforcement, and they tell me and they show me the database that they have, and they show all the gangs. And since I'm in the nation, it's like, oh, y'all, the nation, y'all on there too. So sometimes we think that, oh no, it's the gangs, it's those Bloods and Crips. No, you better go look at that gang database and what is considered a gang, and you may not know that you may be on the list. And not only if you're not on the list, you better know who the hell you hanging around. Because I remember going to a federal court on my boy because he got locked up. And when they came, called my name and said, oh, here's somebody here to visit him, every federal agent in that front row turned around and looked to the back. I'm like, what the hell y'all looking for me for? Because they had been profiling me because I knew him. So don't think that just because, oh, those are them. Oh, no, they watching us too. And they're watching the ones that are helping them not be on this gang task force or this gang policing.
Thank you, TC. I appreciate that. But again, I definitely want to be mindful of our time and everyone's time here. I don't want to hold us up any longer than we have to, but I mean, I got till 9 o'clock if y'all want to chill a little. No, I'm joking. No, but seriously, TC brought up another great point, and I'm probably going to say this the next 5 minutes or so until folks just start hanging up themselves, is that the people, we all know that, and I'm sure we've heard the saying, the people closest to this problem are the closest to the solution. The people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. We are like this, the Gangs Coalition. Honestly, Joe Small, Marquise, for real, these are my dudes. I don't even know how we're here today. We just said we're all tired of this problem, what we gonna do about it, and we just got to work. And the coalition's been growing. It's been growing. We got a website done, and then people are following it. We're able to meet national folks, and you get what I'm saying? This space that we're trying to create is to show that we do have power. We can empower ourselves. But sometimes being uncomfortable is what's empowering you. I didn't say this in the very, very beginning, but I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm formerly gang involved. I've done all of it. Me being in the gang for 13 years allows me to sit here and speak to these kids that's in the gang at 13. I don't want that to go over everybody's head. No, I'm joking. But I make a lot of jokes, sorry, because I make light of traumatic situations because that's how we break through to folks, right? And I'm saying all this to say that it's imperative. Like, honestly, we can't do our work without you all. We can't. When we hear of something egregious that happens, like a brother just asked, how can he see that? He was talking about as the list, right? Unfortunately, they don't share that list publicly. It's not transparent. But when you do get to see it, when you end up in the system and your lawyer's fighting to get that discovery, now you get to see the stuff they got on you because it's already too late. This coalition is about being proactive. We don't want to be reactive to things anymore. We don't want to wait till something happens to try to change it. We're saying we know that this problem exists. We know you guys are doing illegal surveillance. It has to stop. But the only way for us to stop it is to research, is to learn, is to fellowship, is to share information, talk to our national partners. But most importantly, talk to the people closest to the problem. Impact the folks on the ground. I'm talking about the elders that's on the porch, that's seeing things happening. Call us. Reach out to the credible messengers, right? Tell them, hey, we need help. These young boys don't know. Or the mother whose son got caught up in a raid that don't know what to do next. Because you know what happens? That mother that's trying to figure out if she's going to post bail or pay for a lawyer, guess what's going to happen in 3 months? Now she's going to get, if she lives in public housing, she potentially could get a permanent exclusion letter. So now she has to find a place for her family to live if she wants to keep her family together. So when we talked about collateral consequences earlier, it's way, way past just the criminal aspect. So it would be beneath our coalition for us to leave here without extending an olive branch to everyone on this call. Join the coalition, join us. And it doesn't have to be in this capacity. It could literally just be to hear what's going on. It could literally just be to get information from us so you can share with your nephews or your community members. That's what we need more. We need more of the fellowship in the community so we can continue to spread this word that this egregious database is in existence. So with that, I just encourage everyone, please, please, please reach out, follow us. You know, if you need to be taught, just like TC said earlier, we want to find what you're good at. We want to find your lane. We want to help empower you to do what you want to do. But I don't want to keep that in my mouth.
Joe Small, as we close, can you put the flyer for the action one more time? You all have homework. As Victor was just saying, right? There's several ways that you can get involved. Maybe the next thing that you do to take action and bring your commitment to life is by showing up at our upcoming action. This IG report is critical. We need the IG to demonstrate how this secret database is operating, the impact that it has all across the board, and it really is what we need to be able to say in the courtroom, in the legislature, that this database needs to be erased. So please, please, please mark it on your calendar. Drop your email addresses in the chat box. We are going to send you a follow-up email to make sure that you know about this event and all of the updates leading up to this event. So again, I'm doing a special shout out to public housing folks on the call. You all know that you are my heart, but more importantly, this impacts us as public housing residents, because when they think about where these gang raids are going to take place, when they're doing these surveillance, when all of this work is being done by the NYPD, best believe they are surveilling public housing where we live. So thank you so much as always, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And I can't wait.
Don't close out yet.
All right, well, let me say I can't wait to see you all on July 27th.
Thank you, Marquise. It sounded so good. I just wanted to go to go get a drink. Now I'm joking. But can you you can take this down real quick, Joe Small. One other last pitch. Sorry, almost forgot about this. Super important for us. Right now, the coalition, again, like I said earlier, we're always brainstorming on engagement and how to keep folks involved with the work. What we're getting ready to do now, the coalition, and again, it's still some internal stuff that has to be done, but a gentleman who is impacted directly by this gang database, he brought up an idea that I just fell in love with. We're going to start a program via the Gangs Coalition called Sweep Your Block. This program, the young man in Harlem, he started cleaning up his neighborhood in Harlem, literally. He was waking up, going outside with a broom, a dustpan, garbage pail, and sweeping his block, legitly. And I asked him, what do you need my help with? He says, bro, it's bigger than that. You don't understand. And I listened to him. I heard him out. What he's been doing now for the last 5 months by himself, he has a small team now. It's about 8 folks. It is growing. He's having community engagement because the lady who lived across the street from him, I believe she was 73, that never spoke a word to him. One day that man walked past her with his broom and she said, baby, can you throw that out for me? He goes, I sure can. And then says, how was your day? She says, it's going good. And guess what happens now? This lady gives him a cup of coffee every single morning he's out there cleaning up. For us, we're also helping a community thrive by ourselves. Something as simple as just sweeping your block to show that you value your neighborhood means a lot. He also told me he went up to Washington Square Park, I believe. He said he's seen, and excuse me, I'm not racing anything, but he's seen a white woman with a dog. The dog took a poop. The white woman passed the dog to a friend and said, "I'll be right back." He said he watched her. He said she walked to this little pole in the ground and she took out a poop bag, walked back and picked it up. Guess what? That poop bag was free. He asked me, "Vic, why we don't got poop bags in Harlem? Harlem not important?" And I said, "You know what? You're right. Let's make it important." So I'm saying this to say the Sweep the Block program that we will be launching, it is to bring community members into the program because we want to create, we want to bridge that generational gap. We don't want the young folks scared of the elders because they're going to call the cops, and we don't want the elders scared of the young boys with their pants sagging low. We want dialect to happen. We want conversations to happen. So the Sweep the Block program is for a few things, but once we launch it, we will, please look out for it. We want to bring impact to folks, and we want to change the narrative around the term gang. Let's show what the Young Lords was really about. Let's show what we was really doing, the Black Panther Party was really doing. It wasn't gangs that formed, it was families that got together to protect their own. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional about this. I'm gonna relax a little bit, calm myself down. But I'm just saying all this because, again, this database, I promise you all, seriously, we've seen it affect folks in a wide spectrum, demographic, age, whatever it is, you name it, it affects them. So again, don't want to take it too much more time. We've got the rally coming up. We put the website into the chat. You can follow us there. Please stay on the lookout for when we launch the Sweep the Block program. We're trying to do launches in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx neighborhoods. Hopefully we can expand. The more volunteers we get, the more folks that join the coalition, we can grow this out and we can change things for ourselves. Joe Smart, back to you, bro. I think Ali was closing out.
I could close. Just a couple of action items for everybody from tonight. If you can, tweet or post any stories, comments from tonight using Erase the Database NYC. Tell your local officials that gang databases need to go. It's really important for us to reach out to people that represent us and tell us that these are things that hurt communities, not make us safer. As we've been talking about all night, contact the Inspector General's office, tell them they need to investigate gang policing practices. You can call them or you can tweet at them. If you're in New York City, again, just join us for our rally, our first in-person rally in about a year and a half. On July 27th, downtown Manhattan. We'll be getting together as a coalition and with other partners from across the city. And if you want to stay in touch with us, please leave your email in the chat box. You can also follow us on Twitter, and you can check out our website and join our mailing list at gangcoalition.org. And thank you guys for joining. Thank you guys for taking a good chunk out of your midweek in this summer. And please stay cool from the heat, and we'll be in touch soon with some more actions. All right, guys.
Come on.